Robin or Jean or whomever, is anybody hearing us? We live? Hello? Okay, no, I see them talking back and forth, so I figured. Okay. I kind of need to know whether I'm chairing the meeting or Wendell's chairing the meeting. Since he's chair, I assume he will if he can do it remotely, but who calls the meeting to order? Thank you. They're muted. So that means we can't hear them.
Member Wheeler, can you hear us?
Now we can. I heard you, Robin.
Oh,
Okay,
Okay.
we're good to go then.
all right. So UAB meeting, January 14th, a few minutes of technical delay. Call the meeting to order. First thing is a roll call, and Robin, if you'd be so kind to do that, then we'll get that ball rolling.
Okay, Member Wheeler,
Here.
Member Jacobson. Member Jacobson is participating virtually, and I do have his affidavit. Okay, Member Miles is absent. Member Sperlingwood.
Here.
Okay. Member Rockwell.
Yep.
Yes, I hear you. Thank you.
Here.
Member Rockwell.
Here.
Member Davis. Okay, I know that Member Davis is participating tonight. He does not have the ability to speak. He will only be listening. Member Crow.
Here.
Member Fultz.
Here.
And Chair Porter.
Here.
Chair Porter is participating virtually, and I do have his affidavit. Thank you.
All right. Do I hear a motion to adopt the consent items?
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Tim,
Thank you.
Member Rockwell, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Do we have any citizen comment on that before the vote?
No, Mr. Chairman, there is no public comment at this time.
Okay. Any discussion of that on our end? Hearing none, have a vote on the consent item.
Okay, Member Wheeler,
Aye.
Member Jacobson, Member Miles is absent, Member Rockwell,
Aye.
I'm sorry, are you muted, Member Rockwell?
Aye.
Thank you. Member Crow,
Aye.
Member Fultz,
Aye.
and Chair Porter.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Now, the next thing is the adoption of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to adopt the agenda?
So move.
And a second?
Second.
Would we entertain moving things around so staff can get done first? I think there's a new business and old business, but our annual report maybe can be after the staff presentations.
So move to amend my motion to move new business up first, to allow staff to speak first, putting the old business at the end. Does the second concur?
Second, I will second the amended motion.
Thank
All
you.
right. So any citizens comment on that? Do we have citizens comment on that?
Sorry about that. I was fumbling for the mute button.
No, that's all right. It's all right. Story of my life these days.
I haven't done that fumble in at least a couple of weeks. Sorry about that. No, we have no citizen comments at this
All
time.
right.
I'm so embarrassed.
That's all right. So we'll have the vote on that, Robin?
Okay, Member Wheeler,
Aye.
Member Jacobson, Member Miles is absent, Member Rockwell,
Aye.
Member Crow,
Aye.
Member Fultz,
Aye.
and Chair Porter.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously.
Okay, that brings us up to new business, which is our presentation from staff on the advanced metering infrastructure. And,
Mr. Chair,
Personally, yeah, go ahead.
wouldn't the state of the utility be before new business?
Oh, shoot, yeah. And how could I forget the state of the utility? It's the most exciting part of the month.
Thank you,
Dang,
Mr.
I'm
Chair.
sorry. Yeah, thanks, Wes, for fixing that.
I guess that's cues me up here. Chairman Porter, member of the UAB, Tom Brown, Chief Operating Officer for GRU, State of the Utility, reporting for the month of December 2020. It was a very interesting month to say the least. I think I'd like to lead off by just giving a big shout out to all our personnel and energy delivery and water, wastewater, and staff that responded to the Christmas Eve frontal passage. We had a major front pass through around 6 o'clock on Christmas Eve. We had at the peak, about 14,000 of our customers were without service. All customers were restored within 33 hours. The vast majority of them were restored by Christmas morning. This was kind of a unique storm. Usually we have some major outages with taking out main segments. In this case here, we had a couple of those, but we also had numerous onesies and twosies out there, and those are the hardest ones for us because it's a lot easier to deal with 1,000 customers at a time than it is 1,000 customers one at a time. So we had an amazing amount of work to do, and it was accomplished safely in a very short period of time. We probably had about 120 people between our linemen and water, wastewater personnel that were directly responding, and then all our other staff that was here to support them. So a lot of folks gave up their holidays to help other people in the community, and I think that's really the true meaning of spirits of Christmas. It was a really gift to the community to help that. We also had called in some outside mutual aid. Some of our sister cities in the city, Ocala and KUA and Lakeland, folks in their line crews gave up their holidays on Christmas to come help us out as well. So kudos to all those people. It was very much appreciated. December was also represented some very unique events starting within the generation group. And before I go through that, I just want to point out in your packet, it's a little bit, you should have received the coal sourcing report that was requested. And of course, there was a huge quantity purchased last year. I think it was 0 tons total. We're not expecting to really purchase any, I think sometime till between late second or early third quarter of this year. We're burning down our reserves at this point. And also there should have been an update relative to the solar project in there from Origis that Chuck Height provided.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chair.
Turn your mic on. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, you just mentioned we'll be purchasing some more coal third quarter this year. Why would we need to do that if we're converting DH2 to gasification? We're moving away from coal.
That's an excellent question. And where we're at with that is, I think when we first started this conversion, we had close to, 300,000 tons of fuel on the ground. We're down to about 130,000 tons. For the first year of operation, even with the conversion, I think we're probably going to hold reserves at around 60,000 tons till we understand how the conversion is really going to work for us. And also till we get alternate coal supplies. Excuse me for just 1 second here. Sorry about that, get all choked up. We're not going to buy a lot of coal, probably, I wouldn't imagine more than 10 to 20,000 tons, but we'll hold the reserves at 60,000 or in that range for the first year. And probably in years 2 and 3, if the technology is there, gas supply and pricing's there, we'll probably reduce those quantities further down in the 20, 30,000 ton range. But some of it depends on how fast we can get replacement coal in here. If something were to happen to our gas supplies and we had to run on coal, for example, if we couldn't get coal right away, if it took us 6 to 8 weeks, 10 weeks to get coal in, obviously you need enough coal on the ground to operate during that period. So some of our response and where we set those coal levels will be predicated on how quickly we can replace coal when we need to. I hope that addresses your question.
So that
Yeah,
essentially it's there as a backup. In case the project doesn't move as smoothly as we hope it does. Is that a good way of characterizing it?
Yeah, it's just, it's really a dual fired capability. We fully intend to run on gas as long as it's economical. But until everything's proven out, it would be imprudent not to keep enough reserves on to, run at least through the summer. I mean, the Deer Haven 2 project right now is in phase 1, which is the outage phase where they're installing the equipment. And I'm happy to report that project's going extremely well. We got all the components in. We expect to return the unit to fire on the 19th and 20th. And then the rest of the conversion will occur online and should be completed sometime in the end of March timeframe. So at that point, we'll trying out the unit. But that project has moved along even despite COVID-19 with supply chain issues and things like that. It's going quite well. Also, I think if you've been driving around the admin building downtown, you'll notice that the Kelly facility next door, they're starting to remove siding on the side to provide access for our generator turbine replacement. So that outage is going to begin. In some respects, it's all pre-staging right now, but it will begin in earnest the end of this month as well. All the major components are on site, the turbine generator, valves, and things like that. So we're not expecting any problems with that, but that's a big deal, changing out a complete turbine generator set. And the team's working very hard on that. Also, I think of noteworthy within the report is Deer Haven Renewable. We had a failure of an oil line on oil jacking system for the unit. And what that does is it provides oil pressure to the turbine generator before you start to roll the turbine. In this case, the line failed and the bearings weren't pressurized with oil, so we had what they call a bearing rub. And we ended up replacing the generator bearings on both the inboard and outboard end of the generator. I think it's important to note that these lines are not visible from the outside. You can't see them. We could not see the oil leak. The oil that leaked was recaptured. So there was no external evidence to the operators that there was a problem. There was no indication on any of the instrumentation installed on the equipment that there was a problem. The only indication we had occurred when we started to get a rise in bearing temperatures on the last restart, which is usually not great news if you're talking about a bearing, and of course it wasn't. So I can find no fault with our operators or anything. It was just one of those things that happened. There had been an upgrade by the OEM on the generator for the lines that were put in place. The OEM informed Siemens, who supplied the turbine to us. They were the customer of the generator. They did not consider GRU the customer, so they did not bother to tell GRU that these lines needed to be updated. So needless to say, the lines that were back in this repair are a different material, different grade, and hopefully we'll have better service with them. But that's what transpired on that. The team worked pretty hard to get that in and out in the time that they did, working with the OEM bearing people to make that happen.
Mr. Chair, I have a question on this.
Yeah, go ahead, Member Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Brown, I think you've answered my question I was going to ask, but I want to go ahead and confirm. On page ES1, there is a reduction of 97 units, whatever those units are for Deer Haven Renewable for December, and reduction of 91 tons in biomass. I'm assuming that's because of the shutdown due to the bearings. And we used to offer gas and a lot less biomass in December.
Correct. We were offline for about 2 weeks. It was restored, I think.
So that would explain the big differences between budgeted and actual.
Right.
Thank you.
So I think that's about all that's really noteworthy. I mean, safety-wise, we had 2 recordables, which was in stellar. From an automotive transportation vehicles, we had no collisions during the month. We've had 2 recordables, 2 preventable year to date on the automotives, and we've had 3 recordables on the safety. Personnel wise, we're running with 89 vacancies, which is pretty high. On top of that, we have folks out for the coronavirus that tested positive. And of course, everyone that tests positive, the people they come in contact, we send them out as well. So that moves up as down. You know, there's times we can have between 20, 25 people in operations out waiting for tests, waiting for it to be cleared to come back to service. But all that being said, you know, we haven't seen any disruptions in service or performance by the team. So I think that's really good news. Compliance from NERC, no penalties to date. There's 2 non-penalty violations that occurred year to date. From a reliability perspective, excluding the Christmas Eve outage, which was problematic to say the least, we had 60 outages for the month. So with that, that's pretty much what I was going to report on with the report. We do have 2 major initiatives being reported tonight that very proud to see those come in before you. You know, one of them is obviously the AMI project, and that project has been talked about, worked on. I've been here going on 5.5 years now. It was in process probably 4 years before I got here. It's been almost a decade. And I think I've been teasing for the last 2 years that we're actually going to bring the AMI project before the UAB for presentation. Well, tonight's the night. So that's pretty good. We have Chad Parker, utility project team leader, that will be making that presentation to you as well. In addition to that, you asked for a report on the RP, the Integrated Resource Planning Project. We're going to go over that with you. And I can't emphasize that report encompasses a tremendous amount of work by a lot of different people that was compiled over a 2-year period. We asked for many, many changes in it, and that's why you see the number of cases. And Eric and Jamie are going to respond to that and explain that more to you. But Jamie Versage, the managing utility analyst in planning, will be making half the presentation. Eric Walters will be doing the other half of it. And I think out in the crowd, we got some support personnel as well to add questions as need be. I know Joe is on the line, the energy supply officer, as well as Chuck Height, the project engineer. And Chuck Height's also been doing some tremendous amount of work for us lately. You know, he's the project lead on the solar initiative. He's also the project lead on the Kelly turbine generator retrofit, and has been involved heavily in the Deerhaven 2 project as well. So he's been a very busy individual. So with that, look, I'm glad to answer any other questions you might have. If not, I'll let you get your agenda tonight.
Mr.
All
Chair.
right. Well, yeah, go ahead, Member Wheeler.
Thank you. I would like to commend staff for the solar PPA report. We requested that, and I was very happy to see it. I noticed that there were a lot of actions pending, but I'm happy to see deadlines. Previous ones have been met, new ones coming up. Looking forward to each of these as they come along. I guess the next one's the interconnection agreement, and we're still on to have that done by the beginning of March. Is that correct?
I believe so. I think Chuck Height's on here. He'd be more than welcome to chime in here and validate that number, the date.
This is Chuck Height, project manager for the solar initiative. And yeah, I can confirm that in the next, by the end of March, we should be pretty far along as far as the interconnection agreement. Thus far, everything's gone very well, so we don't anticipate any issues.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you, staff, for that presentation. Thanks, Ed. As always, I can't believe I skipped right over the status of utility report. I guess it was my eagerness to get to the AMI that made me do that, but hope all is forgiven. But
I thought that I saw Member Crow with a raised hand. Maybe.
All right. Does Member Crow have a question? Go ahead.
Well, one question for Mr. Brown. How big is a 1,000 tons of coal or 10,000 tons of coal in this case, in terms of, say, number of hopper cars or whatever?
Well, Ed, let me take that one. I was just fiddling around with numbers. You remember Wes said that I should be chair because I was always checking everybody's work with my calculator. I was doing exactly that. You can check my work. Modern coal car, I believe the bigger ones are 110 tons a piece. Some are still 100 tons out there, but I think they're 110 tons. And 60,000 tons of reserve is only about 110,000 megawatt hours. Roughly speaking, am I in the ballpark on that?
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's not much. If you're burning, we used to burn 1 million megawatt hours a year on coal easy. And so a tenth of that for reserve is actually, wouldn't be huge.
Yeah, I think we're burning about 12,000 tons a month right now at the current loading with the unit.
Yeah,
So it's 5 months at the current load point. But if other generation went down and we had to run up the higher load point, and clearly through the summer we run that unit pretty hard typically, I think that 60,000 tons could start to get eaten in a hurry. And you're absolutely right on the coal car quantities. And I have to admit that in my first part of my career, Chairman, I actually was involved with Bethlehem and Steel in the rail car division. We actually built railroad cars, and I was involved in the very first round body, those low body cars that were done. So the first one that came off the line, I was heavily involved in that project way back when, back in the 70s. So
yeah, and I'm just that kind of geek. I keep track of the rail car loadings every month through the DOE website. Yeah, you're up from coal country. You probably know a lot more trivia than I do. Yeah. Remember, Crow, did the 2 or 3 of us all at once answer your questions?
Terrific. Mr. Chair, I would like to have the UAB go on record to show our extreme appreciation for all the hard work that went into trying to handle the emergency right before Christmas and just on Christmas Eve. That really is above and beyond the call of duty for a lot of people, and we're really grateful. Can we go on record and have you communicate that to Mr. Brown for his staff?
I certainly think we can do that. Absolutely. I was just, luckily I wasn't in that number for once. Our tree neighborhood is usually in that number, but I wasn't for once. I was very thankful and thinking about everybody that was.
that's what was rather unique about this storm. A lot of folks said, "What storm? What do you mean you had power outages?" My neighbors were disbelieved that we were out there humping and thumping, trying to get everybody back online because they didn't think there should have been an issue. But clearly there was, 45 knot gusts of winds, depending on where you were, and it made a mess.
Speaking as someone from the northwest side of town, it was one hell of a storm.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. Any more questions, comments, queries? All right. How about if we go to that AMI presentation?
Chad, I think they're calling your number.
Yep, I'm gonna get it pulled up right now.
Chad, I'll make it so that you can share your screen.
Okay. Okay, is it up there?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so Chairman Porter, I'm pleased to hear that you're excited for this, and members of the UAB, I'm pleased to be here to present it. So we'll go ahead and get started. Let me see if I could. Okay, so just to clarify, everybody sees the AMI refresher on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So To start off, I wanted to just give a refresher of what AMI is for those of you that may have missed some of the presentations in the past. So through two-way communication, the AMI system tracks real-time usage of energy consumption and monitors the health of the utilities infrastructure. Each day, information is sent electronically to data collectors located around the city. These collectors relay the data to the AMI head-end system and meter data management system for processing. That data is then sent to the customer information system and billing system to prepare bills. Customers can then access and monitor their consumption via a self-service web portal, empowering them to make informed decisions about budget and conservation.
Excuse me just a second, Chad. When you said real time, is that 15-minute, half hour, hour? What's the time increment?
So we could do 15-minute intervals. We could do 30-minute intervals. We haven't really had those workshops yet to determine what we want, what would suit the utility best. But yes, there's several different interval data, times that we could use for that.
Right.
And that would be for electric, water, and gas service.
Right. Okay.
So the GRU AMI system design, this diagram is a representation of what the GRU canopy and infrastructure would look like high level. At the bottom, you can see the various meter types, the water and gas modules relay information to the electric meter, which sends it out to the routers located on various utility structures. This design represents the mesh network, also known as the local area network, a LAN for short. The routers then relay the data over a cellular fiber backhaul back to a secure data center hosted by the vendor. In this case, it would be ITROM. This would be known as a wide area network, also a WAN for short. This data center will house the head-end system along with the meter data management system. These systems will be integrated with various business applications here at the utility or hosted in the cloud. There are a few listed on the diagram, such as the customer information system, outage management system, and our geographical information system. And always post-deployment integrations into systems such as a prepay solution could be established. So meter reading evolution. This slide is intended to represent the evolution of meter reading as well as how we will manage the process during and post meter deployment. In the first row, you will see how we perform those functions currently. We have manual meters out there and that are manually read every month. The reads are uploaded every evening into our current software from ITROM, which is called Field Collection System, FCS for short. And then FCS exports that as a text file into our billing system. The second row represents the addition of smart meters during the deployment phase. During this phase, it will be a combination of the first and second row. The smart meters and modules send data over the local area network to the routers located throughout the territory. The routers then route that data to the head-end system. Once there, the head-end system will send that to the MDM and will export a file to FCS application with the reads that were collected. FCS then exports the same text file as above with the updated reads for billing. And then in the third row, that will represent the process post-deployment. The process is the same as the second row, except there will be a direct integration with the new CIS, eliminating the need for any text or flat files. This creates a streamlined process for not only reading, but billing. And this shows that throughout, although we're also moving forward with the CIS integration, we could combine the two together as we roll them out, and we'll have a manual process as well as an automated process as we move forward, ultimately having a direct integration with the new CIS. So AMI will be a long-lived asset. Experts estimate the life cycle of project assets for meters to be 20 years. The field area network, which is your routers that are out there on the poles collecting the data, for 10 years, and the use of hosted software will be 20 years. I think it's important to note that with the hosting model, the vendor is responsible for making sure the system is meeting application uptime service levels. In addition, provisions have been made to allow GRU to move to an on-premise system if agreed upon service levels aren't met.
They're hearing Ed Valensky speak, but we're not.
Yeah.
Ed is speaking.
Mr. Chair, we can't hear Mr. Bilarski on our end.
Oh, well. Hey, can anybody hear that back at the office? No. I can hear you, Ed, but the people on the, yeah, the people on the floor can't hear you. Robin, anybody there?
I can hear.
But the floor can't hear Ed.
Okay.
No.
Um, Members on the floor, we're going to move ahead. Ed kind of withdrew his comment at the time being. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
You can hear you.
Okay. All right. We'll work through that offline till the next time Ed has to make a comment. All right. Go ahead, Chad.
All right, moving forward. So where do we stand today? So contract negotiations were initiated and nearing completion with technology and installation vendors. The vendors selected are Itron for the meters and technology. This also includes the head-end system and the meter data management system. Aclara SGS has been selected as the meter installation vendor. They will be responsible for all three service types and warehousing throughout the installation. Negotiations include the drafting and review of a master sales agreement, statement of works, an order document, and software as a service agreement. These agreements have been a collaborative effort between various departments, our consultants, and legal teams to review and negotiate the best terms and with realistic risk. We had extensive discussions with IT, our consultants, and the vendor to understand and formulate a plan for integration with the current CIS during deployment, as well as integrations once the new CIS is stood up. We conducted site surveys for acceptable router locations and also categorized our meter populations and determined which meters would need replacement and which would need to be retrofitted. There will be nearly 100% replacement of residential electric and water meters, with a slightly less replacement of gas. The rest will all be retrofitted with a module. These decisions were based on current age of meters and the ability to accept these modules. We also conducted workshops with the meter installation vendor to discuss expectations for customer care and service, as well as required safety inspections for various meter changeouts. We expect and will hold the installers to the same level of service that we provide our customers today. So where we stand continued. Workshops were conducted with both vendors regarding all service types to determine service level agreements of the installation process, as well as the meter population during and after deployment. Workshops were conducted to establish the deployment strategy for both an external and internal deployment. It was determined that the most return would be from an external deployment of 2 years. Like the CIS contract, internal legal counsel and external legal counsel are reviewing all agreements for accuracy and risk identification and mitigation. Throughout the process, we also created a risk register to identify risk and mitigation strategies in the following areas: safety and health, environment, financial, schedule, performance and quality, utility reputation for the community and the customers. So moving on to our why. So improve safety for both our customers and personnel. Promote superior information gathering and sharing. Provide improved customer choices and engagement. Improve customer experience and satisfaction. Deliver advanced smart city functionality. Improve reliability for the utility. And all the qualitative and quantitative return on investment for the utility. So here's the GM's why. AMI is a tested industry product with ubiquitous deployment across the nation. AMI is not a cutting edge technology, but a proven technology. GRU's processes are ripe for conversion from low tech to high tech, and GRU can eliminate, redirect, and reduce massive amounts of truck rolls, manual meter reads, customer service calls, time lost before leaks are detected, equipment repair, and more. All right, sorry. But so bottom line, in Ed's words, GRU will reduce cost and save money with AMI. So let's take a look at some of our key business drivers. So increasing customer expectations. As a utility, we want to provide the best experience for our customers along with added values. Our customers deserve this and they expect it. Advanced metering opportunities and improved efficiencies. There are many benefits we can discuss in the following slides to show the improved efficiencies along with opportunities. And then our evolving workforce. As a utility, we are behind We work closely with other utilities and have asked the hard questions, leading us to realize that what we were missing from not having an AMI solution in place. So we'll take a look at some of our benefits. So this is a short list, but it shows some of the key benefits. Operational wise, we'll see an improvement in meter accuracy while eliminating the need for on-site meter reading. There will be remote turn on and turn off functionality that will reduce truck rolls. Our revenue protection division can detect energy theft as it's happening, and our line crews can respond to power outages quicker, resulting in shorter outages. And last but not least, we can keep our metering staff out of yards and out of harm's way. Financially, AMI shows savings to the utility by reducing equipment and maintenance costs, increasing individual meter accuracy, and enabling faster restoration during outages and streamlining the billing process. Our customers will benefit from detecting meter failures and leaks early, saving them money and the risk of inconvenience. They will see faster service restoration, improving the accuracy and flexibility of billing, and in time-based rate options can also help customers save money and manage their energy consumption. So we went a step further and we broke them down just a little bit more. So here are some more key customer benefits. So fewer unplanned outages, increased reliability. For example, proactive maintenance will allow GRU to better assess asset health and plan equipment replacements. Faster restoration times and improved services. We can more accurately determine the location of outages and dispatch crews more efficiently. Outage updates and proactive outage notifications keep the customer informed. Improved power quality. For example, visibility into how the system is operating will allow us to better direct voltage fluctuations that can create power quality issues. More information and control. For example, web portals and apps can provide information to empower customers to understand their usage patterns and find opportunities to lower their energy costs. Customers will also get notified of potential water leaks that could raise bills and cause damage. Increased convenience. A few examples would be customers will no longer have to call in to report an outage, as well as these would already be detected in the AMI system. Remote connection of service allows immediate service connections and disconnections without sending a field technician to the customer site. Reduce fees and costs, such as more rate options that align with customer behavior to decrease energy usage and lower costs. Customer safety. So an example of this would be identifying hot customer sockets using temperature data to help prevent potential fires. We could also detect constant flowing gas that could potentially be a leak, and we could mitigate that before it becomes a safety concern. So some key utility benefits. Monitoring and managing operation conditions. For example, improved power quality and system visibility. Capacity planning. So example of this would be when a transformer upgrade is requested, we would look at the transformer load for the previous 3 weeks to determine if the transformer is hitting a threshold or not. This would allow us to evaluate whether the previous transformer sizing is performing in the field as designed, and would help us make cost-effective and informed decisions. Model validation. For example, with AMI voltage data, we would have actual voltage measurements to validate the primary circuit models. This would also help with meter to transformer mapping and transformer load management. Distributed energy resource management. This will help the utility understand the impacts of customer-owned systems while also identifying unregistered customer-owned systems. Asset monitoring and diagnostics. An example of this would be using voltage data to identify overloaded transformers due to unexpected increases in energy use or increasing load in older neighborhoods. Outage management. This will give us the opportunity to identify and verify outages through meter pings and allow us to provide improved estimated restoration times and ultimately improve our restoration altogether. Measuring and verification. This would be a reduction in estimated reads and an increase in meter accuracy across the board for all meter types. And identifying unsafe working conditions. An example of this would be identifying unregistered PV and generator installations. So all of that being said, what's the cost to implement? So capital expenditures is $40.9 million. The O&M during that period, this would be a 2-year deployment, is $6.2 million for a total implementation cost of $47.1 million. And I don't know if you remember, but when we presented this several times in the past, we projected somewhere a little bit higher than this, somewhere around the $50 million mark. So we were able to get this down by working, negotiating, and getting what we need as a utility. So what's the total cost of ownership for the 21 years? The total implementation cost would be $47.1 million for the implementation. O&M and capital over the remaining 19 years would be $32.5 million for a total cost of ownership at $79.6 million. And here's what the cost savings will produce. Total cost savings over 21 years came out to $81.2 million, netting to a return of $1.6 million. And I feel like we took a bit of a conservative approach on the benefit side of it. So we're confident in those numbers there.
Ed's talking again, we can't hear him.
Mr. Chair, we're going to have somebody relay what Ed's saying to us.
Yeah, he asked me to translate, and I'm tempted to actually quote from a movie, but I won't do that. Basically, the savings listed there, he feels and the staff feels that the savings are very conservative and a real baseline, and the savings should come in quite a bit more than that, and that those are to bank on and believable at the very low case. So that was his comments. Okay, I think back to you, Chad.
All right. So we'll move forward to the recommendation. So our recommendation is to authorize the general manager or his designee to execute a software as a service agreement with Itron for a term of 21 years and other agreements as required, in a general agreement with the draft SAS, SOW, order document, and MSA subject to approval by the city attorney as to form and legality. We would also recommend authorizing the general manager or his designee to execute an agreement with the Clara SGS for the installation of smart meters for the AMI solution and other agreements as required in general agreement with the draft SOW and MSA subject to approval by the city attorney as to form and legality.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that presentation, Chad. I appreciate that. Quick question from me before I open up the floor to everybody else. And that is the comment at the very beginning when you talked about the meter reading real time, or the 15-minute or 30-minute or various other time frames. Just based on my own work in that field and analysis of utility data for usefulness that we can't even think of yet, but is out there, the 15-minute, it was much more valuable than the 30-minute. Is there cost related to those times?
There's really not cost related to those times on the electric side. The caveat to that would be on some of the battery operated devices for the water and gas modules. So
yeah, I was speaking particularly of the electricity. So
yeah, we have it set for 15 right now on the electric.
Thank you. Perfect. We're good.
All right.
Okay, open up the floor for the rest of the board for questions and comments, please.
Mr. Chair, if I may first start off here.
Yeah, Member Wheeler, please.
Broadcasting has suggested that the general manager shut his computer down and then turn it back on again. Just go through a power cycle.
Okay, yeah. Ed, can you hear me on that one? Reset your computer by shutting down and turning it back on again.
I have some specific questions, but I'm going to defer and ask staff to talk to me later. I have a solar meter, and I think this process is going to work differently for those of us who have solar power, and I'm curious as to how that's going to work. I don't know if it's a general question, but maybe if staff can follow up with me later. In general, I'm very excited, as all of staff is. We've been waiting for this for years, and I'm very happy to see it happen. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, so solar would be a little different, especially initially. The utility would be handling all solar installations. That was one that was out of scope for the installation vendor. So we're working through processes right now to determine exactly how that will take part. We do have a preliminary plan, and when we get that mapped out, I'll be glad to send it over to you all for review.
I would appreciate that. And I was also curious if we'll be moving into environmental credits now that we have AMI, since GRU does get those credits, as I understand it. So again, a follow-up. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that one.
All right. Other comments from the board? Wow. Silence.
I think
So,
Mr. Jacobson
Mr. Chair,
has one.
I have
Yeah.
a question. Member Crow also has a question. I'm gonna let him go
And so
first.
does Member Jacobson. So I think we stepped on Barry there. So Tim, why don't you go first, and then we'll get to Barry, and then Member Crow.
Okay. So I really just have one question. They were talking about, how this was going to operate on a LAN network with routers and such. And, I assume these are not routers like your average consumer is going to use, but it still made me wonder about security concerns. If somebody wanted to hack the network and could hack the network, is there any sensitive information that they could possibly steal, or could they make changes to the system, cause harm to the system? Has there been any thought to the security of the network?
So there's been a lot of thought around that. We've actually held many meetings discussing the data concerns there. We're actually holding the vendor accountable for some of that. And on top of that, we won't really have much customer data. It will be read data going over that. So there really won't be any critical data passing through those routers. But we have spent a lot of time figuring out the cybersecurity aspect of that. And I'm sure there may be some IT folks on here that would comment more on that, but we have discussed it a lot.
Well, can you hear me now?
Yep.
You've incorporated it as part of the solution as well, I'd add. Not only have we worked on it, but you've incorporated it as part of the solution.
Okay, hold on, Ed. Let me ask him out there. Can you hear Ed now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Excellent. Wow.
And
Microsoft.
before we go any further, could I ask Mr. Parker to take his presentation down so we can see the chambers? That'd be great.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Okay. And I think that led us to Barry. I think Barry was next, and then Member Crow.
We can't hear Barry.
Hold on a second, Barry. Now they can't hear you. Oh, geez. Probably. Let's try rebooting, and then we'll go to Barry, our Member Crow's question, and come back to you. Yeah.
I can hear him, Wendell.
Oh, well, yeah, you can. It's just the floor.
Can't hear him.
Right. Okay, Member Crow, if we can get it, your comment in between our cackling here.
All right, you guys can hear me, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I got two little questions and a big question. For the two little ones first, this UAB has already looked at a new information system, an MIS system. Are we sure that this AMI will feed seamlessly interconnected with connectivity to the new system properly?
I'm sorry, was it the CIS we were talking about?
Yeah, a very expensive one, actually.
Yes. So we've spent a lot of time working on that, incorporating plans and language into these contracts to ensure that there will be seamless integration with the new CIS. And fortunate for us, this is all newer technology. So these systems are designed to talk to one another. Our AMI vendor, Itron, they actually are a partner with SAP, which would be who we're working with on the CIS. And Itron has their own adapter, and SAP has their own adapter, so these two connect seamlessly.
Okay, so the answer is yes, then.
The answer is yes.
Okay, other little question. I read that material that was sent out to us that you presented, was sent out last week or something. But the one thing that I was looking for that I didn't see was impacts on labor, employment, man hours. The man hours for meter reading should go way down, right?
Right. So some of our, in the benefits section where we receive those, the benefits side of this would be for labor reduction in the meter reading department, and also some of our field personnel that goes out and handles some orders, daily tasks.
Well, I mean, do you have projections of expected man-hour reductions or whatever?
Our projected reduction right now would be 21 FTEs.
FTEs?
Yeah.
Which is very significant.
Correct.
Right. Okay, now for the bigger question. When other electric utilities around the nation have talked about this kind of technology, they've often talked about time of day pricing and meters that indicate to the residential homeowner when the production of power is most expensive so they can put their drying at midnight or something like that. Have you talked about time of day pricing or even experimenting with time of day pricing and with utility cost generation feedback to the customer?
So
yeah, that's really, I'll get Chad off the hook on that one. That's not really his bailiwick. That's more, rates section of BFA, budget, finance, and accounting. And we have some skilled professionals down there that have looked at this type of thing for a while. And when this gets fully functional, I'm sure that's something that we'll bring back before the UAB and the commission as another beneficial use, for the customer.
When do you think that this might be operational so that you would be looking at that?
Well, I think you were looking at a several-year time frame at this point.
Several years. Yeah. That's all I had.
Okay, that brings us back to member Jacobson, if we can hear him.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, can you hear him on the floor there?
Yep.
Yep.
All right.
Okay. All right.
So it was just a quick question. Seeing that the profit margins are tight, and I understand using conservative numbers, what would lead to cost overruns in this project?
So some of our cost overruns would be primarily on the installation side, depending on what we find when we're in the field out there, as far as some of the, meter cans such as that. Just general labor, really. We've mapped out our integration processes pretty well, so we feel like we'll be okay in that instance. But when you go to change out 200,000 meters, some of which we haven't seen in a long time, there's no telling what we're going to find when we get out there.
I can imagine. Thank you.
Let me add, Chad, and to you, Barry, member Jacobson. I think the bigger issue is our commitment to the savings or the cost reductions. I don't think it's a commitment to the implementation cost. I think, Chad has probably done this 6 ways from Sunday, but it's a function of, will we change processes? Will we streamline functions? Will we gain efficiencies? Will we reduce meter readers? Will we do all those things? And certainly I'm committed to do that. But that's what we have to do, and reduce the amount of trucks that are out there, reduce the truck rolls, do all those types of things that gets you to that $80-odd million that we showed. And that's why I think that we can do better than that, because there is a commitment from the utility to get us to the 21st century. You all know that this isn't something that other utilities, are looking to do now. They've been doing it for a decade. And, because of the things that we've done in the past, the resources have been constrained so that we haven't been able to do it up until this point. So, we are excited as an organization as well to put this forth, because that's what we need to do.
Ed, is about 70% nationwide smart meters?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
About, last thing I heard was about 3 or 4 years ago, it was about 67%. So I imagine it's higher now, but yeah.
Yeah, that's why I made the comment about it's not exactly cutting edge,
right?
But it is proven technology.
Yeah.
So at this point, there's actually many utilities out there that are actually working on their second iteration, almost their third of AMI technology.
Right. And we get the benefit from that.
Right.
For once.
Well, there's a truth to that. There's a truth to that. We want to be the last one on the block to have a color TV set.
Well, now you're talking my family. Yeah. Was there any other questions on the floor from the board? Any other questions out there on in Zoom land?
Calling in from Zoomland, we have no one at this time, Mr. Chair. The floor is
Okay.
yours.
All right. Well, there's a recommendation out there. I'd be willing to listen to any sort of motion on that.
Move to approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Okay. So I'll ask again formally from our external connection. Do we have any citizen comment on this?
No, sir. At this time, we have no citizen comment. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, let's bring this to a vote. If we could get staff to do a roll call on the vote.
Yes. Member Wheeler.
Aye.
Member
Okay.
Jacobson.
Aye.
Member Miles is absent. Member Rockwell.
Aye.
Member Crow.
Aye.
Member Fultz.
Aye.
And Chair Porter.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously.
All right.
All right. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to have your presentation here and finally get this ball rolling. I'm ecstatic.
Yep. So are we. We're excited. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So, all right, now I've got to go pull my agenda up, managing more than one screen. Boy, I tell you what, next presentation is the integrated resource plan discussion, and it's informational only.
Oh, good evening, Chair Porter and board members. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can everybody hear me?
Can the floor hear him? Okay, got thumbs up everywhere.
Thanks. I'm Dean DeLeo. I'm the Energy Supply Officer for GRU. Today, we have members of the Energy Supply team consisting of Eric Walters, Jamie Forshaw, and Chuck Height, all online to provide a presentation on our current integrated resource plan, which you will hear throughout the night, throughout the presentation, we're going to refer to as the IRP. This original IRP began in 2018, early 2018. This is an extensive technical detailed plan. It's over 95 pages to the report. Our objective today is break down this plan to demonstrate the content of the plan and how this is utilized. We will also discuss another report, which is referred to as the 10-year site plan, and let you know what this report is for. And the reason for that is there's a lot of confusion between the IRP and the 10-year site plan. These are two uniquely different documents used for two uniquely different purposes. So another one of our objectives is to demonstrate to you what these reports are used for, and just as importantly, what they're not used for, and for our short and long-term planning process. This is a 63-page presentation breaking down the 95 pages of the integrated resource plan. So although we will certainly answer questions as we go, we would like to complete our presentation as provided, as we believe many of the questions will be addressed throughout seeing the entire presentation. There are several points in the presentation where we will summarize a section of the report and ask if there are any questions. So we'll have some normal breaks within the presentation to allow some question periods that be more free if that's what the board desires. Before we begin the presentation, though, I feel it's critical to note two very important points about the IRP. As I mentioned before, the original IRP began in early 2018. So it generated 6 scenarios of generation and transmission solutions that were strictly based on economic and feasibility. In October of that same year, the city approved a resolution to go to 100% renewable by 2045. None of those 6 scenarios were renewable scenarios. So we had modifications done to the IRP, which are the latter scenarios. So the purpose of the presentation tonight, we're going to focus on those latter scenarios that support our resolution for the city and not on the earlier resolutions of generation and transmission solutions that do not support our resolution. The other point I want to make out is that we are going to be coordinating the initiation of another integrated resource plan, another IRP in early 2022, calendar year 2022. And the reason for this timing is we have two major projects going on this year. One is already in progress, which is the retrofit of Deerhaven 2 to a dual fuel capability for natural gas. We will need, after that is complete, which will be in the May timeframe, we will need all the operating time and operating data and parameters, empirical data, and inputs to the next IRP. The second major project that's taking place this year is the replacement of the Kelly Generation Station turbine and generator, which is scheduled to begin at the end of this month, January 31st, and all the way through the end of April. We will need adequate time of operating empirical data with the new Unit 8 turbine and generator in order to provide critical inputs to the next integrated resource plan. So we expect we won't have all that critical empirical data we need throughout the entire calendar year of 21 and maybe early in 22 to start as the critical input to the next integrated resource plan. And because that plan takes a lot of time to execute, we would expect to get the results of that next IRP in early 2023. So before we continue with the presentation, I wanted to ask if there were any questions on the objectives for tonight.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, please go ahead, Member Wheeler.
Thank you. I would ask that board members be given a copy of that 95-page plan, electronic document, please. And as we go forward in the future, I would like to see the UAB involved in this planning process. That's my only comments. Thank you.
Yeah, Member Wheeler, I'll interject here. That is in past emails, and somewhere it was given to us. So I think you, me, and Barry, it's buried in there somewhere. I went back and found it. Maybe if we could get Robin to resend it to all of us again, but I know the two newer members probably don't have that because that was about a year and some odd months ago, but it was buried somewhere down in there. So you might want to resend that to all of us to get it fresh up on our calendar, but it's buried back there. Yeah.
I'm a newer member, but I have a copy. But I just wanted to second what he said. In the material that we received, there is some discussion about what would be in the new IRP, and I just want to underscore what he just said, saying that I'd like the UAB to have some input into those objectives for the new version.
All right. Any other comments from the floor on that? Okay, Mr. DeLeo, go ahead.
All right, without further delay, we'll begin the presentation starting with Jamie Forshaw.
Good evening. As Dino said, my name is Jamie Verschaw, and I'm a managing analyst in energy supply. And one of my responsibilities is to help with GRU's generation planning. Next slide, please. As Dino just mentioned, there is some confusion between GRU's Integrated Resource Plan, or IRP for short, and GRU's 10-year site plan. These documents are very different in their purpose, so we're going to start with distinguishing between those two documents. At a high level, an IRP is an ad hoc, comprehensive planning study which provides a recommended mix of resources a utility may use to meet its customers' future electricity needs. IRPs generally have a long-term point of view of 15 years or more, and they focus on the strategic needs of a utility. IRPs provide possible solutions to long-term needs. They evaluate long-term costs and goals, and they use least cost planning principles to give possible ways for a utility to meet those goals. They identify risks, such as fuel diversity and relying too heavily on one fuel, technological risk, particularly where scientific advancements are rapid, and financial risks, such as price volatility, stranded assets, and access to capital. They are a tool in identifying generation options that perform well over whatever criteria it is, be it economic, environmental, or regulatory. Next slide, please. In contrast to an IRP, which is done once in a while to evaluate long-term generation options, a 10-year site plan is really a state-mandated annual report. Its main function is to demonstrate that a utility has enough generation capacity to meet its forecasted load for the next 10 years. Its second function is to give other agencies like Florida Fish and Wildlife and water management boards a heads up if a utility is planning on building generation or transmission. All electric utilities in Florida that have more than 250 megawatts of generation, or any utility planning on building a unit larger than 75 megawatts in the next 10 years, are required to do a 10-year site plan. So that's all the big utilities in Florida. The 10-year site plan outlines what a utility's forecasted energy and demand requirements will be over the next 10 years, and it provides an estimate of how those demands could be met. The data in a 10-year site plan is tentative and is not binding plan of action on utilities. And as I previously mentioned, the primary purpose of a 10-year site plan is assuring that utilities have adequate generation capacity to help keep electricity in the state reliable for the citizens of Florida. Next slide, please. 10-year site plans have 4 required sections. First, a description of your existing generation and transmission facilities. The next is a forecast of energy demand and energy requirements. The demand and energy forecast is a regression analysis done in-house that uses a variety of economic and population growth inputs to arrive at an estimate of what GRU's customer demands will be in future years. The section also contains a utility's forecasted fuel requirements, which we'll talk about more on the next slide. The third section is a forecast of facility requirements, meaning what do you plan on changing in the next 10 years? If you plan on retiring generation or adding generation or transmission, it would be discussed in this section. The last section is environmental land use information, and this is chiefly geared around changes in generation. So if you plan on adding generation, you would have a discussion here on the possible environmental impact of the land where you plan to add that generation. In GRU's case, all generation and transmission listed in the 10-year site plan is either existing, in active development, or it's been approved. No future generation options from the IRP are in the 10-year site plan, only the things that have been approved or are in active development. Next slide, please. As I mentioned on the previous slide, GRU's 10-year site plan includes a forecast of fuel requirements for the next 10 years. GRU uses generation modeling software called GenTrader to model how it could serve its load over the next 10 years. This generation software, GenTrader, is an economic modeling tool to help utilities decide how to dispatch their generation fleet for the least cost possible. If a generation source is 1 cent cheaper than the next generation source, it will choose that 1 cent cheaper generation source. The software's main goal is lowering generation costs, not assuring reliability. So GRU generally adds constraints to the model to reflect how GRU typically dispatches the system in reality to assure reliability. And one comment I've heard is that if you look at GRU's 2020 10-year site plan, is that our fuel forecast shows the biomass unit, Deer Haven Renewable, not running as much as it did in previous years. That's because the GenTrader model used a fuel forecast, and it was a pure economic valuation. If the model estimated that it was slightly cheaper to run something other than DHR, the model chooses to run that. So this has an impact on the forecast of renewable energy in the 10-year site plan. CERC, the Southern Electric Reliability Corporation, which is responsible for the reliable operation of the Florida bulk electric system, they require a 15% reserve margin above a utility's expected peak demand. So the question is, does GRU have 15% more generation capacity than its forecasted load? Yes, GRU does. That is until Deerhaven 2 retires at the end of 2031. Next slide, please. This slide kind of summarizes some of the differences between GRU's 10-year site plan and an IRP. The largest difference between the two is the intent behind them. 10-year site plans are used to demonstrate generation resource adequacy and to give other agencies a heads up of any proposed power plants. The intent of an IRP, on the other hand, is to do a strategic evaluation of future generation options, including what types of technology are available and will be considered, what is the timeline for installing that generation, and what are the likely costs of that option, and how do they compare to other costs for other options. The 10-year site plan is done annually, whereas an IRP is done on an ad hoc basis based upon the strategic needs of the utility. The 10-year site plan is required by Florida law, an IRP is not. In both cases of a 10-year site plan and the IRP, utilities are not bound by their contents. Next slide. Any questions so far? Okay. Now that we've discussed 10-year site plans, we'll delve deeper into what IRPs are. IRPs are tools that identify the long-term strategic needs of a utility, and they provide possible paths by which those needs could be met. Utilities are a long-term business, and so IRPs have a long-term approach. Utility assets typically last a long time. They are capital-intensive businesses, and their project can take years of planning, permitting, and construction before they're online. As such, IRPs usually have a horizon of at least 15 years. The good thing about IRPs is that because they have such a long-term focus for options, they avoid the pitfalls of taking short-term approaches that could ultimately lead to higher long-term costs. Next slide, please. With IRPs, specialized generation software creates complex economic models to solve for the lowest life cycle cost, which includes the capital cost to install the unit, the fuel cost to run the unit, produce energy, and the operating cost to keep it reliable. It takes us all and give it a set of constraints. The lowest cost option that the software solves for is considered the reference case. Other options and scenarios done in the IRP are compared to this reference case. As we all know, the lowest cost option is not always the best option. Sometimes there's very compelling reasons to choose an alternative that is not the least cost. However, the total lifecycle costs paid by GRU's customers are a key component that we obviously cannot overlook. Next slide, please. One goal of GRU's IRPs is to play the what if game. This is, what if this cost went up, or what if this changed? An IRP allows you to compare those different scenarios and see their relative impact. Some things that IRPs play that what if game with are things like economic drivers, making fuel prices higher or lower, or changing market access to power, or making load higher or lower. There are environmental drivers you can play with, such as CO2 emissions or renewable energy requirements. There are regulatory drivers, such as network reliability and the need to recover a sudden loss of load and the ability to ramp quickly to follow load. There are technological drivers, such as the availability of emerging technology or improving efficiency over time. Next slide, please. Here you can see the process by which an IRP typically comes together. You develop your forecast of energy and peak demands, your fuel prices. You take your existing resources and all of their existing costs and efficiencies, and you lay out their expected modifications or retirements over time. Next, you identify your criteria and your time frame. Next, you evaluate the possible ways in which you could meet that load and what types of generation you're willing to consider and those expected costs of that generation. Next, you do all the modeling, all the scenarios, sensitivities, the what ifs, and finally, you compare the outputs of all those different scenarios and develop your recommendations. Next slide, please. In the economic evaluation of an IRP, you have cash flows for capital, for fuel, and for operational and maintenance costs, and they occur at different times and different amounts in different years. As we all know, a dollar today does not have the same purchasing power as a dollar a year from now. So IRPs use discounted cash flow analysis to arrive at the net present value of an option. This economic analysis is commonly used in investment planning or to analyze profitability of an investment or project. Net present value brings all cash flows over the life of a project back to a reference year's dollars. In this IRP we're discussing tonight, 2018 was the reference year for those dollars. Next slide, please. In the case of GRU's IRP, we find the net present value of revenue requirements, which is the net costs that GRU would need to recover for utilities portfolio. Revenue requirement is the common term that you'll hear in GRU's budget sessions, and it's a term referred to throughout the IRP. As I mentioned on the last slide, the reference year for the financial comparison is 2018. One item to mention is that the IRP is forward-looking only. Costs that occurred in the past are not included in the valuation. The future costs of all existing generation and all potential generation are included in the valuation. Next slide, please. There are a couple of terms that I'll make sure that we have a common definition for, since you'll hear them repeatedly. Demand is the expected requirement to meet firm native load. Demand is the instantaneous electrical requirement of our system. And we usually give it the most attention when we're talking about peak demand, or the most demand that occurs in our system at a given time. GRU's current peak demand for the year is around 430 megawatts, usually occurs in late summer. Generating capacity is the maximum electrical output of any single generator under certain conditions. Some generators are more efficient or have higher output in wintertime, so they're defined under certain conditions. Reserve margin is your generating capacity that's left after meeting your peak demand. I don't want to go too far in the weeds, but for all utilities in the US are required to follow standards set by NERC, which is the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. NERC delegates this authority to regional entities. For GRU's case, this is CERC, which is the Southeastern Electric Reliability Corporation. So CERC requires a 15% planning margin, and based on GRU's 2020 peak of 425 megawatts, GRU currently has a 48% reserve margin. Next slide, please. Fuel supply availability and fuel costs are, of course, an important component of long-term planning. Over-reliance on a single fuel source can leave you subject to cost and reliability risk. If possible, you want to have some fuel diversity to be able to pivot should conditions change. And so long-term planning should consider fuel and resource diversity. For GRU's IRP, natural gas, coal, and biomass were the fuels that were considered. Next slide, please. GRU has transmission ties to Duke Energy and to FPL. However, due to reliability constraints, there are limits to how much power GRU can import. As I mentioned before, NERC sets the standards for utilities in the United States, and one of those standards is BAL, which is short for balance, 002-2, and it says that GRU must be able to replace its largest source of generation or power import via transmission within 30 minutes of a loss of that power. GRU has around 120 megawatts of quick start generation. And so GRU's imports are generally limited to 120 megawatts. For the IRP for this analysis, market power and purchase power forecasts, those costs are closely related to natural gas pricing, as natural gas is by far the dominant fuel in Florida. Next slide, please. GRU's IRP was conducted by the Energy Authority, abbreviated TEA or T, you may hear called that. GRU is a member of T. TEA is a not-for-profit company headquartered in Jacksonville. They provide GRU with energy trading, natural gas procurement, risk management, and energy analytics services, among other services. Their IRP team is compiled of analytics and fuel and energy experts, most of them having previous experience working at utilities. They have performed IRPs for lots of other utilities. I listed some here that were somewhat similar to GRU, either in area or in load, such as Pacific Northwest Public Utility District, City of Dover, City of Springfield, Missouri, City Water and Light in Springfield, Missouri, and MEAG, or Municipal Electric Authority of Georgia. Some of those utilities are pretty close to GRU in size, GRU having 430 megawatts of peak. Some of them are larger, but those are some of the utilities that TEA has done IRPs for. And GRU's IRP was valued at $225,000, but it was included in GRU's membership. Next slide, please.
Mr. Chair, I do have two questions, one minor, one more rhetorical, if I may. Oh no, now we've lost Wendell's.
Nah, I was muted. Yeah, go ahead, Member Wheeler. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Fumbling with my mute.
On page 15, just so I understand, I'm following as we read along. There's the discussion of 120 versus 200 megawatts in transmission, and we have asterisks. And what's the difference between 120 and 200? Why are both mentioned on that page?
Sure. 120 megawatts is GRU's typical operating limit for importing power. That's what we use right now. We looked at another case for the IRP, which Eric will talk about later, where we opened up that import limit to 200 megawatts. And we said, well, what happens if we import that, or we change that import limit to 200 megawatts? Is there cost savings there?
So that would be importing 200 as a backup for reserve, or is that what you're referring to then? For instant
that
generation?
Is purchasing 200 megawatts either as a sale or as a capacity resource from the market.
But not necessarily just for backups, for emergency, for any time, basically.
For any time, really, yes.
Yeah. And the other one is more of a rhetorical question for the general manager. I'm just trying to figure out our relationship with the Energy Authority. If they're providing, or they're doing the staff work to provide the IRP to us, is that what you're saying? GRU's IRP is included in the GRU's membership. So is it TIA who is doing this planning for us?
Yeah, it goes through T. Membership has its privileges.
Okay.
I didn't make that up. I heard that a long time ago.
And I like it. I'm just, as we go forward and put all this into context, I just want to keep in mind that TIA's job is to find fossil fuels and deliver them to us. They're an energy trader, natural gas procurement. They may have a tendency to prefer fossil fuels over renewable energies.
Oh, no, Kimosabe.
That's why I directed the question to you, Mr. Manager.
Pardon me?
That's why I directed the question to you.
No. They were formed to serve municipal utilities, and they work with all the municipal utilities that are struggling as they, and some prospering as they get into the the next century and what a utility is to be. And so they are not specifically focused on fossil fuels. They've done a numerous amount of solar deals. They've structured them. They put them together. They're very creative as an organization. So no, and that's why I jumped in. I wouldn't characterize them that way. I don't think they have a bias that way at all.
Okay, I just wanted to raise that question in context of who they
Sure.
are and our relationship with them. I assume under fuel supply, page 14, that we didn't include solar because it's free, or I mean, as a fuel supply.
You want to answer that, Jamie?
Sure. Yes, solar isn't listed there as a fuel, but as we'll talk about later on, solar was, of course, considered as a generation source.
I just didn't see they're listed as a fuel supply, so I'm kind of curious. Again, putting all this into context.
Excuse me, this is Dina DeLeo. We're listing fuel as a commodity. Solar is not a commodity.
Okay, again, just for forecast and context. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, we go into a little detail later on the fuel price forecast for those different fuels. And of course, there is no price for fuel for solar. But yeah, we'll talk a little bit later on more about the solar options and how those come into play. Okay, Eric, if you could go to the next slide for me, please. Thank you. The IRP evolved as time went on, as there were several developments at GRU. The scope of the IRP changed and grew over the course of 18 months. The IRP kicked off in February 2018. In October 2018, the City Commission passed the 2045 net zero emissions resolution. In February 2019, GRU received the results of an area control error study that, among other things, evaluated solar's potential impact on our system. And Eric Walters will talk more about area control error later. We had the development of the Kelly Steam Turbine 8 upgrade and the GRU Solar ITN. All of these items resulted in many more scenarios than originally planned. In the IRP report, there are scenarios that include fossil fueled and renewable options, but as only the renewable scenarios will meet the 2045 net zero emission goal, those are the scenarios that we'll focus on tonight. So we just had a couple questions, but if there's any more questions, I'll be happy to take them now. Otherwise, I can move on. All right, marching on. Next, we'll talk about the forecasts and assumptions, the pricing that went into the IRP. Next slide, please. On the energy side of the forecast, net energy for load is the total energy needed to meet electrical load over time. I spoke earlier about GRU's methodology for forecasting energy and demand in our 10-year site plan, and those were the values we used for the first 10 years of the study. Beyond year 10, we grew energy by 0.7% annually, which is the average growth rate we've seen over the past decade or so. Historically, GRU has seen about 2,000 gigawatt hours, which is 2 million megawatt hours of net energy for load, and our peak load is around 430 megawatts. Next slide, please. Here you can see GRU's monthly peak load, and you can see the obvious influence that the seasons have on our peak load. Annual load typically peaks in the summer, usually in the August timeframe. The spring and fall see lower loads, and occasionally we have another peak in the winter if we get a cold snap. Here you can see GRU's historical peak loads in red and our forecasted peak load in gray.
Oh, I thought that red was atrial fibrillation. I wasn't sure.
Depends on your point of view. Next slide, please. In a similar fashion, this slide shows GRU's historical net energy for load and the same energy trends with peak energy consumption in the summer, falling energy consumption in the spring and fall, and a smaller peak in consumption in the winter months. Next slide, please. There are a few things going on in this slide. The bars on the graph, the vertical bars, they represent GRU's existing generating units. You can see those listed off to the right-hand side. And for each year that a generating unit is in service, the bars appear on the chart for that year. When a unit is scheduled to retire, that generating unit's generating capacity and its bars are removed from the chart. The black line that you see at the top of the chart is GRU's forecasted demand, and the dotted red line above that black line is GRU's forecasted demand with the 15% reserve margin added on. You can see that GRU is forecasted to have adequate generation until 2032. That is when GRU's largest unit, Deer Haven 2, is scheduled to retire. So the question the IRP is trying to answer is, what are some of the best ways that we can fill in that white space below the red line with generation capacity that provides reliable power and at the lowest cost? I mean, this is the big question that we're trying to answer. Next slide, please.
I will tell you, Jamie, I love this chart out of everything that you've done. I mean, it's like in a pictorial sense, it just portrays what you're solving for. It's a great chart.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great chart. I wish I could take credit for it, but yeah, the goal is just to try and fill in that white space with efficient generation and renewable generation.
Mr. Chair, a quick question. I hate to interrupt, but I do like it.
No, go ahead, Member Wheeler.
Just
please.
What is SEC 1-2, the purple?
South Energy Center 1 and 2. That's the one in back of the
Thank you.
Bluegill restaurant. Yeah.
Yes, the South Energy Center has a small combustion turbine, and it has a small RICE, reciprocating internal combustion engine, that serve the UF Health South Campus. Next slide, please. Fuel forecasts in the IRP were compiled using industry resources and benchmarks. Natural gas typically has the highest volatility of all generation fuels. And so there were 3 sensitivities run on gas: a base price, high gas price, and a low gas price. The coal price forecast assumed that we continue burning coal at forecasted rates. It also accounted for expected changes in transportation costs for coal. The IRP does not account for the recently approved and in progress Deer Haven 2 retrofit. At the time the IRP was being conducted, we weren't sure if the Deer Haven 2 project was going to be feasible. So the IRP has Deer Haven 2 running on coal as its primary fuel source. Next slide, please. Here we can see the 3 price forecasts for natural gas that were used in the study. The base case, purple in the middle there, that was based on a Wood Mackenzie forecast. The low price forecast in blue, it was based on NYMEX futures, and the high case in red was based on EIA forecast.
Those are in constant dollars, right?
Those are in dollars per MMBTU, which is sort of the standard pricing for natural gas.
Are those current dollars or are they constant dollars of 2018 dollars?
Those are in real dollars.
Not corrected back to inflation, just
not corrected back to inflation, correct.
Current, yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we'd expect to pay in 2023, 2028, 2033. Yes.
Right. Cash price, yes.
Yeah.
All right, next slide, please. This slide shows the fuel forecast for solid fuels. We use GRU's fuel forecast for coal and for biomass. In the renewable scenarios, the model includes a second biomass plant that is added when Deer Haven 2 retires. For those cases, we have a higher fuel price for biomass with the expectation that more demand for waste would likely result in higher transportation costs and thus an overall higher fuel cost for biomass. Next slide, please. There were several alternatives that were considered for meeting future demand. There were natural gas fueled combined cycle, which is efficient and good for base load. There were combustion turbines that can pick up load very quickly, but are generally not particularly efficient. There were also reciprocating internal combustion engines or RICE engines. RICE engines are attractive in that they can start quickly, they are efficient across their operating range, and they are really viewed as a renewable energy enabler, and that they can fill an intermittency that typically occurs with solar and wind. We also considered purchase power agreements from other utilities that were a resource option that was considered. We looked at utility scale solar, either built by GRU or purchased through a PPA with and without energy storage were considered. No coal or nuclear options were considered for this analysis. Next slide, please. Nationwide, there are more options for renewable energy. There is wind, there's of course large-scale solar, there's hydroelectric, geothermal, ocean, wave and tidal, biomass. There's more developing, there's hydrogen. But what is available and reliable now for Gainesville is large-scale solar and biomass. So those are the renewable options that were considered for the IRP. Next slide, please. Okay, here you can get a sense for the options that were considered. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this slide, but just want to give you a feel for the size of the chunks of these generation options. So, of course, combined cycle may be a great fit for a large utility, but for GRU, you know, it's pretty chunky. It's a good size that you have to bite off to get the efficiencies. So that was an option. And of course, combustion turbines are a bit smaller. They come in smaller varieties, and the RICE engines are even smaller than that. For energy storage, we looked at it in increments of 5 megawatts with 4-hour storage. And all the energy storage had 4 hours of storage with it. And then for solar PV, we looked at it in increments of 20 megawatts. So the model could choose to add more than 20 megawatts at one time. It could choose to add whatever it wanted. But these are the increments that were included in the IRP. Next slide, please. So here we have the cost assumptions that went into the IRP. Most of these are typically just following CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which is averaged 2.25% for the past 10 years. So for the most part, we're just following CPI for those operational costs and those increase in capital costs. Solar costs, we kept firm with the expectation that as efficiencies and advances in manufacturing move along, that the cost may continue to go down. So we left this price for solar constant throughout the study. All the capital costs assume levelized debt service, meaning that we're not working out the full cost of the project at one time, or are taking out debt and financing it and paying that off through time. And for time value of money, we have general inflation at 2.1%, our discount rate of 3%, and our tax exempt bond interest rate of 3.9%. Next slide, please. Are there any questions on what I've provided so far? All right, hearing none. Eric Walters
Mr.
will
Chair.
be taking over the rest. Oh, sorry.
I think
Sorry.
you got one. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm processing the information correctly. So based on the demand and resource balance chart, in 2032, we're basically going to have around a 300 megawatt shortage. Would that be a fair interpretation of that chart?
I don't believe it's quite that high.
It's hard to.
Yeah, on that scale there. So Deer Haven Unit 2 is a 228 roughly megawatt unit. But yes, there's at least 230 megawatts there that are going to be filled in with something.
And then looking at the supply options, even the biggest. Well, so I'm not familiar with this technology. What is the difference between a 1x1, 2x1, and 3x1 combined cycle unit?
Sure. So a combined cycle has 2 cycles of creating power. So you have a simple cycle turbine, meaning that natural gas is fed into a combustion turbine. It is burned, and as a result of that, electrical generation is made. Then the gases, the exhaust gases from that combustion process, they are routed to a heat recovery steam generator, meaning the heat from those exhaust gases is recovered, you make steam. That steam is then diverted to a steam turbine to make additional power. So a 1x1 means you have 1 combustion turbine and 1 steam turbine. A 2x1 means you have 2 combustion turbines and 1 steam turbine. 3x1 means you have 3 combustion turbines and 1 steam turbine. So nice thing about a 3x1 or 3-on-1, as they're commonly called, is that you can cycle those combustion turbines on and off to help you follow the load.
Thank you. That's really interesting. But so then just looking at this list of supply options, the only things that come close to the need we're going to have coming up, it would be a combined cycle. Would that also be a fair interpretation of this information?
Well, I'll answer that by saying, as we started this process in February 2018, these were all the options that were considered. At that time, we did not yet have the 2045 net zero resolution. And so fossil fueled units were on the table, and that's what combined cycle is. It uses natural gas. Basically all these options on here are using natural gas, apart from solar. So as we went through the process, we were running through these scenarios, and we had fossil fueled options, including combined cycle. Then we had the 2045 net zero emissions resolution come along, and we knew that we needed to do some additional scenarios that did not use fossil fuels. So that's why here we see these options. And in the base case that we'll talk about in a little bit, there is a combined cycle that was chosen in the base case as the least cost option. And from that base case, we'll go into the renewable options and compare those to the reference case, to base case.
Okay, thank you very much.
That gap could be made in part by solar, made up by solar and rice.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, Member Wheeler.
So the supply options, in essence, don't recognize the alternatives that you were working with after the 2045 resolution was passed by the City Council. You don't have purchase from outside, and you don't have biomass or storage listed as supply options, all of which are in the other scenarios. So perhaps those things should be included on this chart here under supply options.
Can I jump in here and maybe clarify a little bit? I think if I'm reading this correctly, those are just the increments they were studied in. You can put 10 increments of 20 megawatts of solar on. Those were just the increments, and same with the storage. So is that a fair analysis there, Jamie?
Yes, that is correct. That you can, the model actually chooses what to install, but yes, it can choose 4 units of solar. So 4 times 20, you can do 80 megawatts at one time. It can install whatever it needs to. But these were the options that were included for the reference case, for the base case. Biomass was not originally a part of the reference case, the base case, but for the renewable scenarios, biomass was included as a resource.
So this is just the base case. Yeah, excuse me there, Wes. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is a supply options for base case only. This is not supply options for other alternatives.
Well, for scenarios that we're talking about tonight, which is, it'll be the base case and it'll be the renewable scenarios. That's correct. So these options would just be for the base case, and then for the renewable scenarios, what we have to choose from is biomass and solar with energy storage. Or you could choose, we also have an option for, which Eric will talk about in a little bit, which is sourcing that renewable energy from the market.
Yes, I understand. The point I'm trying to make is that this chart is not inclusive enough.
Well, the only thing that I think is off of this is the biomass plan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Another biomass, because at the time they did this in 2018, nobody was considering another biomass plant. But then when we were given the directive to get, it almost is in line with what Tim has just said. You're looking at this, you need some other baseload facility to fill that hole. And that, I don't want to give the end, I don't want to go to the back of the story. Sorry, but the only way you fill that baseload need is with another biomass plant. And so that's why when you get into that reference case, you move from that reference case to the renewable case, that gets introduced. So this would be your typical utility process to develop a reference case with the technology that's out there. And I think that's, yeah, they're showing you that.
I understand. It's just too limited.
Okay.
It doesn't, it's the 1998 or 2008, whatever, it's pre-resolution. I think this page should show the other options. Thank you.
Real quick, this is Dino DeLeo again, Energy Supply Officer. We're briefing the integrated resource plan as it was presented to us in 2018. So it generated a reference case in 6 scenarios long before we had the resolution that we incorporated into it. So we're briefing you what was provided. Eric Walters is going to show you later in options that we revised the IRP. We never started a new IRP. We just revised the IRP as it existed to add the renewable options. But our objective tonight was to brief the IRP as presented, and that's what we're doing.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I had a question as well.
Go ahead, Member Fultz.
If we could go back to slide 24 with the chart that the general manager likes. I think it's slide 24. It's the one that shows the black line and the red line.
It's 22.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So my question is, how committed are we to where that black line is at? And what role do we have to play in determining where that black line is at? Because that seems like a pretty critical part of the equation here that I'm not hearing talked about very much.
Anytime you make these type of scenarios, you have to pick a kind of a line in the sand, and the line in the sand here by GRU is 0.7% a year, and that's just what you produce. There's a bunch of key assumptions in here that you have to make when you do these models. You have to make some assumptions, but I would contend that during a time of extreme technology change that's happening much quicker than normal, that those assumptions aren't as useful as they might have been in past years. So you're kind of hung out to dry by choosing the scenarios because you really don't know what's going to happen. So it's neither here nor there for tonight's work, but it's long-term what you have to deal with.
Okay, so, but that, the trajectory of that black line, to me, assumes a not aggressive investment in conservation.
I would go even further and say that it doesn't match reality with all the new technologies that are coming in that are all going to reduce electricity use. The other thing is that even if you said you had a generation increase, you could not say with any surety that that generation increase would be concurrent with a peak. And that black line is a peak thing that you would design to for your reliability. And so even if you said you're going to increase electricity use by having more electric vehicles, nowhere would that demand that you would increase the peak. So I would say that there's a couple of big clangers hanging on the slope of that black line there that I don't think that matches some versions of reality.
Real quick, again, this is Dino DeLeo, Energy Supply Officer. I want to point out that that is our forecasted increase in customer and what we think our peak load would be. You would not want to make that line lower based on some assumptions, because then you would fall short of meeting what your generation needs and your additional 15% you're required per NERC regulations. So you have to go off of your forecasted generation and what you know. And that trend pretty much follows. If there's advancements in technology, which we're counting on that for our IRP, then it would be improved. But you would not want to make that lower, because then all your scenarios that you would produce would fall short if your assumptions are inaccurate.
That's true, but then you go back to what Member Fultz was alluding to, and that is that upward sloping line that never quits is relying on a laissez-faire attitude towards energy efficiency. Because there's certainly much more room to change that peak load line than meets the eye in our community. So, you know, damn if you do, damn if you don't. It's kind of a tough nut to get to, but I think there's a lot of holes in that.
Chair Porter, let me give you an example. In a summer application, we're going to have Deerhaven 2 running, Deerhaven 1 running, combined cycle running, at all that time in the Kelly plant. So we'll have all 4 plants. In the morning, all those plants will be at the bottom. They'll be in their most inefficient state. But the reason you have 4 plants running is you have a peak that's coming at 1800 or 1900 that night that you have to meet. And you have to have those 4 loads available to meet the peak.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. This is the same analogy. We have to come up with scenarios that are going to cover the most, the empirical data that we have today that forecast our load increase based on customers. We couldn't use those efficiencies. Clearly, as you continue to revise the IRP over the years, you continue to bring that down.
Yeah.
The original IRP that started in 2018, by the way, was only a 20-year IRP, so it only went out to 2039. It didn't even cover the 2045 because there was no resolution.
Right.
IRP. The next IRP that we do that starts in 2022 is going to be based on a 30-year period.
Right. Okay.
So I hear what you're saying
also,
about the
let me,
danger
Member
of...
Chair, if I can jump in here as well. There is a lot hanging on these lines, and the black lines in particular, and the red dash lines. And we're going to get into here in a few minutes some sensitivity scenarios that take into account some of those changes. What if we are wrong in our scenario, in our forecast of this load? Because so much is hanging on that, you got to kind of have an understanding of what a misforecast in load, what it could cost you. And is there a significant change in the generation that the model forecast or recommends based on that? So you're correct. Everything's hanging on that black line. But you do what you can with what you know at the current time to forecast it, and then you run sensitivities. What if it's high? What if it's low? What if something doesn't pan out as we thought? And then that kind of gives you an overall broad view of what the plan is saying.
All right. Thanks, Eric. And I think Member Fultz had another follow-on comment.
Well, so just 2 quick things. So I hear what is being said about the danger of underestimating that black line. I hear that loud and clear, but it seems to me that there's also significant danger in overestimating it. And I think that folks have seen the impact of that in the past. And then secondly, that black line to me is not like the sun setting and the sun rising. Like, it isn't just science. Like, we have a role to play in deciding what that black line is going to be. And we just talked tonight, with the AMI technology about the possibility of something like load shifting. So I just want to be really clear that I think that needs to be a very central part of the conversation, is not just thinking about where that black line is going to be, but where do we want it to be, and what role can we play in affecting where that black line is at? Because if what we're saying is that renewable generation can only be here and consumption is going to be here, that disconnect has to be addressed. And to me, it has to be addressed at least partially through pretty aggressive conservation efforts. So that's all I want to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Foltz. I would go further and even add that something as simple as moving the pins on your pool pumps around the city is a difference of 10 megawatts in our peak load. And that's a pretty simple thing to do. It just takes a little bit of incentive on doing that. So we're going to develop that over the next 10 years. I'm positive of that. But can
yeah,
I?
What we can do, what we can do, Chair, is all the meter readers will lay off. We'll have them go around and replace those pins on the folks.
Yeah, that is a long-term concern, that moving workers into different jobs. We probably need to, as a city and as a utility, make sure we find a home for them, not just leave them out in a lurch. But that's a topic for another day. May I entertain both the board and the staff? We had to move this meeting, it's my understanding, and start an hour later. And we have a 75-page presentation that we're down into the 30 some odd pages on or something. And we do have another item that must be adjudicated tonight before we leave. I don't want to leave staff hanging out for another meeting on this, but we do need to go through this. Can I entertain some conversation about splitting this meeting up? Or what is staff's pleasure on that?
I'll ask Dino, since he's the driving force here.
I mean, I don't want to leave. Everybody's all ready and everything like that, but it could, with a lot of questions, this is very important to us. It's a fairly long presentation. It could easily go another couple hours.
As I said during the initial part, when the intro is part of us tonight is presenting the IRP and breaking it down in parts.
Yeah.
We would prefer to complete the presentation as we provided it, so that we could give the full story of what the original IRP looks like and the options associated. That would be our preference, but again, we will, if the board wants something different than that, we will certainly accommodate as necessary.
Right. No, Dino, we did ask for this, and we did want to see all this. So let me just, in the back of your minds, point out before we continue on pretty quickly that the other item is the annual report from the board, and Member Crow so nicely put in some edits to correct my English language. And we'll just probably a real quick question at the end of the night: do we just proceed and push that on to the commission as is? Because I think it's a pretty continuous and full and complete document as is. But just let's not vote on that right now. Just let's think about this and let's proceed on.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Just so I understand what you're saying, are you suggesting that we might want to have a full workshop on this IRP alone? And
what I was thinking about is it's going to be a pretty long night, is maybe just splitting the presentation up and doing half of it tonight and half another time. But staff's all geared up and got everything ready and got the presentation ready, and it's their thoughts on having that given to us, and we can take the IRP, the written 95-page document, and Robin will give a copy. So with our knowledge of the presentation and the written document, on our own, we can do a pretty good review of what this whole thing means.
Mr. Chair, if I could jump in, you know that you were going to have a joint city commission meeting, joint city UAB meeting on the 26th, but that is being canceled. So perhaps we could go back and have your workshop and just devote that to the IRP and have a full discussion. That's just a thought.
Okay, any ideas from the board? What's the pleasure?
The joint workshop's been canceled?
Between us and the city commission, I had a conversation with Mayor Poe, and he did not have anything directly online on his end, and I kind of thought that the better part of valor would be to delete that joint workshop, because I knew in the back of my mind what we wanted to do is work as a UAB on this IRP in a more centralized thought process.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Second session on this. The IRP document itself is 104 pages long, and I feel like we've really just begun to kind of chew away at this, and there's lots and lots and lots of stuff in that I think deserves our detailed attention. And it's going to be getting late tonight, and I think it would be better to start another time.
Okay, there's a thought process there.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm improvising, reacting here. We have a policy plan that's in limbo. And
yes.
I thought that was going to be discussed at the joint city UAB meeting. I guess that's not going to happen. I do want to spend a lot of time on this IRP, but I also want to spend some time on our policy plan, and maybe someday, maybe before our 4-year terms are over, maybe we might get that plan implemented. And there's also other things we want to talk about, but maybe both the policy plan and the IRP for a workshop. I don't know. I'm just asking.
Yeah, I hear you, Member Wheeler.
And Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
I would just add that I almost didn't ask my questions earlier because I know this is a long presentation and it is getting late. And I don't want anybody to not ask questions because of time constraints. There's a lot to absorb here and make sure that we all understand.
Sorry, maybe I shouldn't have brought it up. I just was looking at the slide count and then looking at the numbers and thinking that we had some other items that it might be onwards 11 o'clock before we got finished. So with that in mind, and more than a couple of us still have day jobs. So again, I'm reluctant to go against staff's desires to have a presentation on this because of the work they put into it and the holistic nature of the picture they want to present. So I'm kind of stuck. I think I'm straddling a barbed wire fence here. You know, at this stage, Dino and Eric, why don't we proceed a little while longer? There's a couple of nice break points in the information here, but we're just getting kind of rolling in some of the important concepts. So why don't we keep going a little bit while longer?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Dino, and sorry about the confusion.
And we will accommodate whatever is needed. So
yeah.
You want to start here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. Chair, board members, my name is Eric Walters, Admin and Fuels Operations Director. Part of this, my responsibility is also kind of feeding information into this IRP and looking at a strategic approach to it. So Jamie's done a great job of kind of leading up to what we're doing here and kind of the background. And I'm going to go really into the reference case and the answer to that question that he posed on the chart that the general manager likes so much, and then also get into the renewable scenarios. So looking at these reference case considerations, there's a number of things that we obviously have to consider. We have to look at the biomass and coal price projections that were provided by GRU, as well as the gas projections that TEA provided. We have to look at generation retirement, and that schedule was unchanged when we looked at this IRP. So none of those dates were moved or modified in any way. We have the load forecast, as we've already had a discussion on, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the sensitivities around that load forecast later, as well as the 120 megawatt purchase power import limit that we've talked about before. So when you look at these models, I love what what Chair said is that you have to drive towards something, right? And so the driver for this is having to meet or exceed that reserve planning margin that's dictated by NERC and CERC in this case, and that margin of 15%. And that was one of the primary model constraints that was considered. So that is a major driver, and we'll talk about some of those sensitivities as well. You have to look at the resource additions based on that reserve margin constraint and the capacity. You got to look at the revenue requirements. As Jamie said, this is all the cost or all the revenue that's required to meet all of the needs to finalize that or to execute the operations plan. And then there was no forced generation addition. So we didn't say, hey, you're going to add this, at least in the reference case, or you're going to add this here at a certain time frame. We let the model crunch the numbers and spit out the best recommendation that it had. So with that, let's take a look at this reference case and the demand and resource balance. And again, this is kind of an iteration of that chart. What you see in the middle of that red circle is how the model answered this question, right? You see there's no significant resource additions until 2032, which is after the year that Unit 2 retires. You also see that it does add some solar as soon as possible. So obviously we started this process in 2018. It says, all right, 2 years from now in 2021, which is the current year. But once we all know that we have solar coming online in 2023. So this chart is kind of convoluted. So let's go to the table. Let's make this a little bit clearer. But in actuality, you still see the solid bars here. And you see the hash marks, which are the new additions that the model recommends in the reference case. This table is a little bit clearer to understand what the model is recommending. So in 2021, proposed, it had new solar in the amount of 80 megawatts. And I have in parentheses there 28 megawatts of additional capacity. Because solar is not synchronous generation, and because solar varies a lot with weather, with time of year, there's typically a certain percentage of that's only counted towards capacity. So you may have 80 megawatts nominally of solar that's installed, but the model only includes about 35% of that nameplate capacity, which equals to about 28 additional megawatts of capacity. So 1 megawatt of solar doesn't necessarily equal 1 megawatt of capacity, because of your variations and intermittency in the output for solar. You see in 2031, you have a 3-on-1 combined cycle, roughly 198 megawatts. 2032, you're starting to add reciprocating or RICE engines, 27 megawatts in 2032, an additional 9 in 2034. And then 2038, it adds about 5 megawatts of battery storage or energy storage on the back end of that. Now, again, this is the reference case. Okay, and so all of this obviously came before the resolution. So we will jump into what that resolution means in a minute. But you'll notice that most of the additions come after the retirement of Deerhaven 2, as we relayed earlier. Now let's talk about annual revenue requirements. This chart is colorful. I like pretty pictures. But what it really means is that it is giving you a cumulative view of the annual revenue requirement. Now it's broken down into 4 different parts of this. You have fuel and purchase power cost in the red, which is the majority of the cost most of the years. You have spot market interchange, which is the purchase of electric energy from the market. You have fixed cost of existing generation. So obviously the initial capital cost and past costs are not included, but everything going forward in the model is included and compensated for in your total cost. And then the last component is that annual, the new construction and the fixed cost of those new resources. So you take an annual look at how the cost of each year of each of those components throughout the study period for this reference case. Now, every one of the different scenarios has a chart or a graph that looks like this, but we're only looking at this one to say, this is what it looks like, this is what it represents. But the board can obviously go back and look at all those different scenarios and see a similar graph for that. You're looking here at the cumulative MPV, or the revenue requirements, and it's simply taking the previous graph and adding them onto each other. So year 2 is the sum of years 1 and 2 of cost. Year 10 is the sum of years 1 through 10 of cost. And you see the same components, fuel and purchase power, spot market, the fixed cost of existing, and also the fixed cost of new generation. So when you look at this number, there's a number in the box there that's, 1,900 million or 1.9 billion, whatever you want to call it. But that is the cumulative MPV, or the cumulative requirement over that 20-year period, over the study period. And this is the reference cost that's going to be, that every other scenario is compared to, okay? So we look at this and we say, when you look at this comparative cost, this is what the model would say is the lowest cost or the most efficient, that meets all the constraints that were put onto the model. Obviously, this was before any policy direction that was put in place by the resolution. But if there were no, absent of any policy or resolution that's in place, this would be the pure economic and reliability recommendation that would come from the IRP. And again, that number is the reference which we're going to compare all of the other scenarios. Let's talk a little bit about the alternate scenarios. So there's varying constraints. These scenarios vary constraints or inputs, and the idea is to show the value or the cost relative to the reference case, right? So as we look at these, the idea is to say, what is the difference in cost, or what is the value of having this or not having this different component, or in this scenario? So they help identify and build future scenarios that you want to study. Based on the outcome of some of these alternate scenarios, it makes you think, well, what if? You start to play the what if game. What if we don't put in this? What if we put these two options together? What does that look like, and how does it compare to the reference cost or the reference case? And so these alternate scenarios help to paint the entire picture. The reference scenario is kind of the main frame, right? The alternate scenarios kind of paint the entire picture, so you can see exactly how they compare to one another. So some of these variations could include transmission constraints, fuel and load variations. We've kind of talked about the importance of those already, and allowing forced or early retirements in those scenarios. So we'll jump into what they mean here. They've been grouped into 5 main categories. So the first is sensitivity and expanded analysis. So gas price sensitivities, price volatility, fuel risk. You'll see the value in that. You'll see system scenarios, which change our reference case of our existing electric system. And you see the value or cost of those. You see load scenarios, and that evaluates the impact of load in reference to your reference case. So if your load was high, what does that look like? And if I overestimated my load and my load is actually lower, what does that look like? Does it change the outcome? We'll look at area control error in these ACE scenarios, and I'll really dive into that in the next few slides, because that's going to be an important part in understanding the renewable scenarios later on. And then we talk explicitly about renewable scenarios that meet the greenhouse gas in the 2045 resolution. So first, the system scenarios. Again, we limit our import to 120 megawatts. We have enough generation to cover about 120 megawatts of loss on our system. So we try to operate so we don't exceed that by very much. But we realize that that also constrains our access to market power that could be cheaper than what we're purchasing now or generating now. So is there a value to that? And what is that value? That scenario is meant to bring those out. Allowing early retirements of any existing unit. So if we have, if our retirement dates are further out in the future, 2026, 2031. We allow the model to retire any of them at any time if it resulted in a net savings across the entire study period. And the same thing with this third scenario of allowing early retirement of any unit except for DHR. We realize that DHR is fairly young in its operational life. We also realize that DHR is a huge component of our renewable goal. And so adding that component into the scenario and the value there. We looked at load, assuming in a low load case, we assume the complete loss of the city of Alachua load after the current contract ends in March of 2022. On the other side, we also looked at a high load case. What does 30 additional megawatts of load mean to the system? If our peak is 30 megawatts higher, does that change the answer to the equation? We also looked at a winter peaking scenario. If our winter peak is equal to our summer peak, what does that do? Does that change the outcome? So before we go on, we really need to talk about ACE and system balance. And a lot of what comes after this comes from an understanding of what ACE is and how it affects the generating system. So I'm going to spend a few minutes on this slide and then we'll kind of breeze through the rest. So if you're starting at the lower left, ACE is really a balance. It is your generation and your purchase power minus your system load. Your goal is to always be at zero, okay? That says that if you're at zero, both what your electric load and what you're supplying is balanced. And that is the goal of a balancing authority and the goal of NERC for the reliability of the electric system, the bulk electric system. Conversely, if your ACE is negative, that means you're under generating and you need to find more generation. And if your ACE is positive, that means you're over generating and you need to back down your generation. If you look at it from a balance or a scale standpoint, it kind of looks like that graphic in the middle, right? On one side, you have demand. Inside that demand is your load. Your demand bucket handles your load, the electrical load that is in the city of Gainesville. Also, if you have any sales, say you're selling 30 megawatts to another entity, that goes in that demand bucket on that one side. On the other side, you have a supply bucket, and that is your purchase power or any energy that you generate within the system, okay? And so that goes into your supply bucket. And you see I have a little Duracell battery there that represents energy storage, right? And at any given time, it can go in either bucket, depending on what it's doing. If it is meeting or responding to a change in load or demand, then it goes into the supply bucket and it's supplying power to the system. However, if it's depleted and you need to recharge it for use later, it would go in the demand side. So it all depends on what you're doing with that battery, and it can go in either bucket at any time. On the right, you see solar that's into that supply bucket, right? And so when you look at this balance and this scale, you can see that if one bucket starts to change a whole lot or very quickly, and that balance starts to give way, you've got to now make compensation on the other side. I've either got to change my load or I've got to generate some more power to integrate or to implement and put in that bucket to balance it out. And you can imagine walking with 2 5-gallon buckets full of water. If you're slow and steady and that level doesn't change much, it's fairly smooth going. But if you get off balance and one of those things starts to slosh around, right? Now you're wet and you've got a mess and you're losing everything and you're creating a mess, right? Think of the same thing on your electric system. If your electric system isn't balanced, you can get into real trouble very quickly. When you look at solar going into that supply side, think about that solar being a quick change in the level of that bucket that now you have to respond to balance it out. Any quick changes in either side of those could potentially throw your system off balance. Your ACE tells you how balanced or how out of balance you are. And that's important when you consider the regulatory requirements going forward. So this scale or this graph shows a couple of things. At the bottom, we've taken empirical data from an existing solar farm within our service territory, and we've scaled it up to 50 megawatts. And on this day, the reference date, which is July 16th of 2019, you can see some variations here and some changes in the output of that solar field. So if we had 50 megawatts of solar on our system, this is what it will look like, just scaled up from existing data. Now let's jump to the top line, the orange line, and that is our generation output for that same day. So you can see it's fairly smooth. There's some changes and there's some variation in the top, but for the most part, our generation responded and followed the curve for that day. I can guarantee you it probably rained that day because the solar output, went down, and also the generation went down. But even before that, you see some variations in that solar output as a result of that. Now let's work down from that orange line. When you look at that gray line, that's what the generation output has to be if you integrate solar into it. So in other words, your generation responds that way. That's your generation response if you had 50 megawatts of solar on the system. And you can see that curve is not quite as smooth as it was before. Now let's up that again. The yellow line is if the solar, if you had 100 megawatts of solar, if you doubled it and you put it on your system, that yellow line is the generation response that would be required on the system to meet demand and to keep your ACE basically at zero. Now you can see there's some very quick and very sharp changes. Think about that balance that we talked about on that previous slide. What solar adds, it adds quick changes in that one bucket, and that now you have to respond to with something else. And therein lies the rub, is that there's a balance that must be maintained, but solar counteracts that balance in a lot of ways. We can overcome that, but there's going to be some other things that have to be considered for us to do that. So again, jumping into why the ACE study. So the ACE study projected how much solar we could add to our existing system and still stay within those regulatory requirements. All right. NERC has a long-term and a short-term view on ACE. NERC has a long-term view in that it is a 1-minute average for the previous 12 months. Okay, that's called your CPS-1 or Control Performance Standard 1. And we monitor and send that to NERC every quarter. And that's the long-term impact. It has to be above a certain threshold, right? On the short term, there's something called a BAAL, which means that I can't over-generate or under-generate. Or in other words, my ACE can't be positive for more than 30 consecutive minutes, or I receive a NERC violation. That's the short-term ACE management, right? And the ACE is the main feeder into that. So when you look at this, NERC is saying long-term are you controlling and short-term are you controlling? So when you look at an ACE study, it accounts for all of those. It accounts for the impact to your ACE that solar adds as a result of that. In short, here are the ACE study results that came out of the recommendations. The study estimated short-term and long-term ACE, as we've discussed, and it did it using 40 megawatt and 70 megawatt solar site installations, right? It identified a need for up to 60 megawatts of additional quick start resources. Otherwise, you would not be able to maintain that ACE. You would be out of compliance during that time period. And it recommended maintaining a 2-to-1 ratio for solar installations. So in other words, for every 40 megawatts of solar installed, it recommended it recommended installing 20 megawatts of some kind of quick start capacity would be required to that. So that is the ACE study. That is what it recommended to ensure that we met regulatory requirements as we continue to add solar onto our system. Now, is that 2-to-1 ratio, is it correct? It kind of depends on the size of the system. When we did research with the rest of the industry, we recognize that that number could be as low as high as 4-to-1 or as low as 2-to-1. I guess those are reversed, right? But it's somewhere between a 2-to-4 ratio for every megawatt of solar that you have. And we'll show that a little bit later. There are challenges that come with solar. And not to seem obstructionist, but we have to be realist. They are things that we have to overcome because we have a regulatory background that we must also fit this system into. There's intermittency. We understand that, you know, the sun goes away and so does the solar generation. They're very high ramp rates. And so when you add a lot of generation into your system very quickly, again, that balance is thrown off. You've now got to compensate with something else. Right now, the inverters have limitations as far as VAR support, and there have been issues with harmonics, even though later iterations have less of an impact of harmonics. But there's still that concern that has to be accounted for. Large land area requirements for the install of solar. It requires geographic diversity to really not compound itself. So if one solar site is lower in output, the idea is that if you have geographic diversity, then the other sites are still outputting and your impact is minimal. And also the inability to call for reserves on this. You know, if we have 50 megawatts of solar and the sun goes away, if there's a pop-up afternoon thunderstorm, we cannot call for the loss of that 50 megawatts like we can with synchronous generation. We must internally, outside of the reserve system, make up for that difference. That means that our generation has to make up for that difference. We have to have something to be able to respond to that. Right now, NERC considers solar as a supplement to fossil, right? And there's a couple of reasons to that. It's daylight only. If you look at the solar curve, obviously you can't generate solar at this time of the night, right? It is intermittent. It is heavily dependent on cloud cover, weather, and seasonality. There's differences in the average hours of sunshine from one month to the next. In January, as far as solar output and actually producing megawatts, you have about 6 hours in the month of January that solar is actually putting out an appreciable amount of power. In May, that difference is 10 hours, right? So there's a difference even in the time of year of how much you're going to get out of solar. And so because of the regulatory constraints, solar is still considered a supplement to fossil. It is not a replacement. It is simply a supplement. You've got to make solar reliable and to make it something that you can be sustainable and ensure that you're supplying all the power needs that you have. You've got to couple solar with something else. So right now we have basically three things or three areas that we can couple solar with. You can couple it with energy storage. It can be, you know, batteries, which is the main thing right now. That can help make it reliable. You can couple it with RICE technology. The benefits there are that it's a quick start. It is a fossil fuel. It is natural gas, but it's very efficient over the entire range. And that's why a lot of other utilities have gone the RICE route and using RICE technology. Or you can couple solar with some future technology. There's been advances in hydrogen and fuel cells to act as and couple with that solar output to make it more reliable. But as things stand right now in the regulatory landscape, solar is still a supplement and it must be coupled with something else to make it reliable. So what about batteries? With the current technology, you've got high upfront costs for install. You've got losses with charging, with storing, with discharging those batteries. It's a relatively short life cycle. And in consideration, they must be overbuilt to maintain the output and the reliability that you need, or you must be constantly replacing them to keep the output as to where you need it. There's potential safety risk, and there's also limitation in capacity and duration, or megawatts versus megawatt hours, right? So if I have a 10 megawatt battery, it's not necessarily 10 megawatt hours, right? If I look at megawatt hours, I can put out 10 megawatts for 1 hour, or I can put out 2 megawatts for 5 hours, right? It all depends on how you use the battery as far as the duration that you can, or the value that it provides to your system. So all of those things have to be figured out and balanced when you look at these scenarios and look at the implementation of solar. Questions so far?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yeah, go ahead, Wes.
just a quick point of clarification or a statement. As I understand it, battery technology is changing rapidly, almost daily, and many of these, the costs are dropping quickly. And for comparison's sake, you could put up the same chart about a large combustion turbine, gas-generated turbine that would have high upfront cost. There would probably be losses with the generation. It might have might need to be overbuilt, et cetera, et cetera. So just placing all this into context that these are a lot of negatives and none of the positives. Thank you.
And Chair, absolutely. You can do that with everything has pros and cons. There's positives and there's negatives to both, right? The positives of batteries, obviously, that they are renewable or can be renewable, because if I charge them with solar, they're considered renewable. If I charge them with grid power, well, maybe they're not so renewable anymore, right? So there's positives and negatives, obviously. But I think the takeaway from this is even with the positives and the negatives, what we're seeing now is that there are some barriers to making all these things fit together. Will those things change in the future? Absolutely. And that's what we're banking on. And that's what we're going to talk about here a little bit later in the presentation. So those positives are duly noted. So let's talk about the renewable scenarios. It came as a result of the Gainesville City Commission resolution that came in October of 2018 to reach a community-wide net zero greenhouse gas emissions. And that target was set for 2045. So as a result, in this IRP process, GRU prescribed 3 renewable resource scenarios. Each one of these plans includes solar and biomass. And so those are the main 2 renewable sources that we have available to us here in Florida. The plans to address the negative ACE impacts that we talked about that are caused by solar intermittency, the main ways we consider them are as follows. Number 1 is battery storage. The second one is quick start RICE. We've already talked about the pros and cons of both. And also the third is renewable based market power. So the idea is that there may be the formation or the participation in a renewable energy power market. Today that does not exist, but as more and more utilities move towards renewable, there is a chance that it could exist. We, in this instance, are assuming that it does. And so those are the 3 options that we took advantage of and told the model, hey, you can use those in your scenarios. So let's run quickly through what these scenarios are. The first is scenario 1 with GRU as an island, which means there's no renewable market available. Okay, I can't buy or sell renewable energy. If I have to be a net zero or 100% renewable, then I can't buy off the market if there's no market that exists. But we do have to take into account reliability. We cannot sit as an island and not have something to replace the loss of solar. So RICE is used for reliability purposes, but it is not used to meet load or dispatched to meet load, only to respond to changes in solar output. And for this instance, we took the more, I guess, conservative approach of installing 5 megawatts of RICE engines for every 20 megawatts of solar, or quick start, 5 megawatts of quick start for every 20 megawatts of solar. So we're using more of that 4-to-1 ratio. It's somewhere between that 2 and 4, but so we chose 4 in this scenarios to be a little bit more conservative. In the second scenario, GRU is no longer an island. We're assuming that that renewable market is available, that it exists, and we have access to it. The import limit is about 50 megawatts, and the price was assumed to be about $50 per megawatt. No RICE, again, was used to meet load in these scenarios, but RICE is present in all of them for reliability. And again, the same ratio of quick start generation to solar. So for every 20 megawatts of solar, we have at least 5 megawatts of quick start. That could be batteries or RICE. And the third scenario is rice and renewable, which means that we have the renewable market is available. Rice can contribute to capacity and energy. So we can count rice as a generation source and dispatch it. And we use, again, the similar scenario for 5 megawatts for every 20 megawatts of solar for quick start. So you plug those into the model, and what comes out? Here's what the generation additions are for the renewable scenarios for the integrated resource plan. You will see all three of those cases have somewhere around 700 to 800 megawatts of solar. Now, only 35% of that nameplate capacity actually can be used for counted towards capacity, right? So again, 1 megawatt of solar does not equal 1 megawatt of capacity because of the intermittency. In each scenario, we have anywhere between 175 to 195 megawatts of battery, and we consider that a 4-hour battery. So it can provide that output for a duration of 4 hours. Each one of these scenarios presents an additional biomass plant, 103 megawatts of biomass. So it's a DHR2, for lack of a better term. So there is a second biomass plant in play. And each one of these scenarios also has about 120 megawatts of rice generation installed. Depending on the scenario, say it can be used for load, or it can't be used for load, only to respond to reliability concerns. And then the last line, you see basically the revenue requirements that are there for each scenario. And again, these were all compared back to the reference case and the reference cost for those scenarios. All right, let's talk about some key resource considerations. Considerations for additional solar. Your ACE requirements must be considered with the addition of solar. ACE and the monitoring of ACE protects the reliability and the resiliency of the system. NERC, by its standards and regulations, still treats solar as a supplemental generation. As solar becomes a larger part of the output to the bulk electric system, could those change? Absolutely. But NERC's prime example and prime driver is the reliability of the system. Of the 2,400 some odd unique standards in NERC, you will hear zero implications about cost. There is no mention of cost to meet those standards. So their main driver is reliability. So we cannot leave out the regulatory requirements that come with that. Based on the ACE study, every 20 megawatts is recommended that every 20 megawatts of additional solar, there will also be 10 megawatts of quick start generation. Will it be 10? It's somewhere between 5 and 10 is the estimation based on the industry and based on the ACE implications. With the current technology that's available, rice is modeled due to the economics and lower capital requirements. So it is a lower capital requirement up front for the megawatts that you need. And also the economics work out better long-term. Battery storage and gas turbines right now are too costly to meet that need. As the member suggested, as these prices shift, then the preferred technology will shift as well. I think the idea here is that we've got to give it time to get down to that point and see how far that pricing shifts, and then evaluate from that point what changes and how much of those changes are needed.
Mr. Chair, I hate to interrupt, but I do have a quick question.
Go ahead, Member Wheeler, please.
Just because this caught my attention, because the materials we received the numbers differ a bit from what's been presented tonight. On page 49, you're showing 5 megawatts installed for every 20 megawatts. And our materials have said 10, and now you've gone back to 10 here on this page. So is it 5 megawatts or is it 10 megawatts? I'm seeing both numbers between 49, page 49 and page 51.
Absolutely. Let me clarify that. As you see on the screen, it says requires up to 10. So the ACE study in itself recommends 10. So a 2-to-1 ratio.
But on page 49, you're showing 5.
Correct. As we talk to folks around the industry, who have batteries installed and are looking at these long-term installs, they used a number of 4 to 1. So that would be 5 megawatts for every 20 megawatts of solar installed. So for our renewable resources or renewable scenarios, we chose the lower number, that 5 megawatts. That's what we chose to run because that's what the industry says, hey, this is about right, and we're seeing that this could work, right? If you go strictly by the ACE study and strictly by the regulatory requirements, it is recommending that you do 10. So here we say up to 10. What is the real number? Well, for our system, we've really got to get into it to figure that out. But for modeling purposes, we believe it's somewhere between 5 and 10 megawatts for every 20 megawatts of solar that's installed. That's why you see the two different numbers. We chose the more conservative approach when we ran our scenarios based on the industry, but the ACE study done by an independent engineer, they didn't take any of those considerations in. They strictly looked at the ACE.
Yeah, I've got a question. How easy is it for you to run different scenarios? I mean, you can do it yourself, or do you have to have a consulting arrangement for TEA to do every new scenario? Or is it real simple for you guys to do it yourself?
Well, when you look at the overall time frame of an IRP, you're looking at somewhere between 4 and 6 months, okay? And so the bulk of that time is really building the base case. And when I say base case, it's really more model constraints and making sure that the initial constraints that you put in place actually make sense and then not making things come out weird, right? So once that initial model is built and up to date, you know, it may be a few weeks that you can run a different scenario, right? So, but you've got to make sure that your constraints are all right and correct. And from there, once you've validated those, then you can start running these additional scenarios.
So it's not a real stumbling block to try another alternative.
Correct. We can set up as many alternatives as we want, realizing it's not just one for one. If you do 20 different scenarios, that time is obviously going to be longer than if you run 5. But correct, we can say, here are the scenarios that you need to run to compare to that base case.
Can I jump in here for a second? I mean, it's interesting what Member Crow is saying here. I mean, it's interesting. I think you really need to focus on what Eric has just said under, you know, this page 51. This is the current technology available. If we want to sit there and speculate and we want to say that, oh, batteries will become, you know, cheaper by 30% over the next 5 years or whatever that number is, I mean, you can have infinite numbers, but that's not what we're in the business to do. Our business is about looking at what the current technology is. And if we were to do this today, and I've heard the folks on the board talk about this, you know, what's the plan to get to that? Well, if we were to look at the plan today, we'd be building rice engines. That would be the plan. But we're being prudent saying, we're looking to see where the technology is going. So you can run 1,000 different models here, and 995 of them are going to be based on speculation. We've done speculation before at GRU. It did not turn out well. We're not going to do it again. Leave it at that.
Thank you, Ed. So when we look at resources that meet this 2045 resolution, okay, all of these scenarios include the construction of additional biomass plant. Again, they contribute to system reliability and fuel diversity. All these scenarios include rice technology, which right now is the most economical way to provide that quick start support that's needed. And all the scenarios result in a significant increase in what we call excess or dump energy. When we look at dump energy, what is it? Well, it occurs when your generation exceeds load, right? And the ability to reduce generation is exhausted. So in other words, all of my generating facilities are at the minimum, but it is still higher than my load at that point. Any excess energy is sold, or what we call dumped, onto the energy market at below cost. It also assumes that a market is available. There are times that everyone else is in a similar situation and there is no one buying. So when you get into shoulder months like we are now, there's a lot of excess dump energy that goes into the market because we need generation online at night to be ready for the peak in the morning. But obviously, when we sell it into the market, it is sold at significantly below what it cost us to make. So we can mitigate this by either the curtailment of solar production in these scenarios, these renewable scenarios, but that would assume we would have the leeway within the PPA to do that. And also, we could do it by market sales if that market is available to sell into. So, on this path to 2045, what do we need to do? What are we looking at? So we're looking at measured increments of large installations. And when I mean large, I mean 50 plus megawatts. We're looking at large installations of solar. We need to look at measured increments because as the member said earlier, these pricing and everything is changing as we speak. We're expecting and hoping for battery storage technology to improve. We're expecting and hoping for battery storage pricing to decrease as it has over the recent history. It may allow for large-scale use of battery storage instead of RICE for that quick start support. But it all depends on where those price points meet and where they cross to when we can now bank on and plan to use battery storage instead of RICE. Right now, the cost and the prohibitions that come along with battery storage are just too high. Could it be lower 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 3 years from now? Absolutely. And that's kind of what we're banking on. But if we chart out a plan, as Ed said, today, right now, the most cost-effective, economical, and reliable way to do it is RICE. For large solar additions is also likely to require transmission and distribution system upgrades. We saw in those renewable scenarios, solar quantities in upwards of 700 to 800 megawatts. Well, those solar additions and all those additional megawatts will have to be tied onto the transmission system. It's going to require upgrades to those systems, and it's going to require upgrade possibly to our distribution system as well to be able to handle all of that additional power. In these scenarios, those upgrade costs are also included. So, recap. My professor at UF once told me, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So, I'm telling you what I told you. We described the purpose and the differences of the IRP versus the 10-year site plan. We went through the methodology and all the considerations and constraints for the IRP. We presented the results for the reference case, and also we presented results for renewable scenarios compared to the reference case. As a recap, this graph hasn't changed at all, but in our reference case, most of the new addition occurs after the retirement of Deer Haven 2 in 2031. It's calling for a 3-on-1 combined cycle powered by natural gas. It's calling for 80 megawatts of solar. It's calling for additional RICE and also battery storage in those out years. In comparison, again, this chart has not changed at all. When you look at the three options for the renewable scenarios, each one of them requires large installations of solar, anywhere between 700 to 800 megawatts. It requires roughly 200 megawatts of battery. It requires an additional biomass plant of the same size as DHR, and also for reliability constraints, adding in 120 megawatts of RICE. And again, the revenue requirements to be compared to the reference case.
Hey, Eric, how many acres would that solar array have to cover?
Oh my gosh, you're making me do math in public.
I love it.
The most recent estimate, I believe, is 5 acres per megawatt. I believe is the most recent estimate. I think Chuck has a reliable number there.
That's a pretty good one.
So If you're looking at 700 megawatts,
3,500 acres.
you're looking at 3,500 acres, right?
Do we have 3,500 acres that aren't under trees remaining?
Ed, one problem at a time, Ed.
No, I just want to give a context.
No, let's keep going there, Eric, please.
Let's keep shooting down the idea.
All right, so takeaways. We've actually made some recent progress towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The conversion of Deerhaven Unit 2 to natural gas, or to the ability to dual fire with natural gas, is on track to be complete the second quarter of 2021, and is approximately 300,000 tons reduction of CO2 emissions every year. We are about to start on the replacement of Kelly Steam Turbine 8, which, by the way, was a common recommendation in all the scenarios, and all the economics were based on the replacement of the steam turbine. It also has the lowest emissions of all our generation units right now. And you all know about the 50 megawatts of solar generation that's scheduled to be installed by the first quarter of 2023. So reaching these renewable goals takes planning. There's things that we have to overcome.
2021?
I'm sorry?
Excuse me, Teresa, you broke up a little bit. What was that comment?
He said the first quarter of 2020, is it 2021? 50 megawatt?
2023.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
So reaching renewable goals takes planning. There's currently a technology barrier that is a significant barrier. We've got to make sure that technology is allowed to further advance. The earlier that GRU adopts this technology, the higher the cost will be. We have current regulations that are a significant barrier. NERC regulations hinders a complete transition away from fossil fuels. It still considers solar as a supplemental generation source, not a primary, and not a replacement for synchronous generation. So that may change with further technological advancement. But as we see it, and as the regulation stands right now, it is a significant barrier for us to get there with the current NERC standards and regulations. The cost to maintain reliability with renewables also must be considered. The price per megawatt of supplemental renewables is dropping, and it's dropped significantly over the past 2 years, let alone 5 to 10 years. But you also must consider the overall cost of maintaining reliability while implementing these renewables. They all have to be coupled together. You can't have one without the other. So, future IRPs, what does it look like? It is an iterative process. So it's not like you do one and say, hey, I'm done, right? So you kind of re-up, and as you make progress, you then take another look at that horizon. So long-term, an IRP can provide strategic direction. I don't want to go left, I want to go right. And I know I want to go that way, but I'm not quite sure every step I'm going to take to get to that goal. However, if you look at the short term, it does provide you some actionable options to evaluate and execute to start you down that path. So when you look at considerations for the next IRP, one would definitely be a 25-year study period, okay? It would obviously encompass the year 2045 at that point. We would be past the goal of the net zero greenhouse gas emissions, right? It would also include the first round of battery replacements. So as you look at these renewable scenarios and you're installing these batteries now, they have a limited life. Excuse me, anywhere from 15 to 20 years. So a 25-year look, you start to encompass that first round of battery replacements, and those costs are now incorporated into that study. You also look at the renewal of any early solar PPAs that you put in place. So the current solar PPA that we just signed is roughly 20 years, and the industry standard is somewhere around 20 years for a solar PPA. Well, a 25-year study not only takes us past that 2045, but it also looks at the cost and the renewed cost of renewing some of those early solar PPAs as they expire. And it also includes the replacement of DHR, something that was not encompassed in the first IRP. But on the books, DHR is a 30-year plan. It became commercial in December of 2013, which means in the books, it retires in 2043, 30 years later. And so we also have to look at the replacement of DHR. Can we do things to extend its life and maybe push a little past that? Absolutely. But when you look at these things, you also have to look at the entire study period and also all the implications that go with it. Also in the next IRP, there will be tighter integration with the BFA model, so budget, finance, and accounting. Consider impacts to rates, revenue requirements, economic feasibility. So if we have to issue however many millions in new debt, what does that do to our bond rating? What does it do to our rates? How much do we have to raise rates to accomplish this? So the next round helps us to answer some of those questions. So there's a couple of milestones we have to hit first before we start the next IRP process. Number one is empirical data from steam turbine 8 and the replacement. Number two is empirical data from Unit 2, natural gas retrofit. The operational parameters of both of those units are going to change. We got to have the correct data to make sure that we're putting the right inputs in. As you know, garbage in, garbage out. So we want to avoid that. Also, updated technology pricing, right? As we go into that and we start making those assumptions, we will absolutely get and capture any decreases in price from the beginning of 2018 until whenever the study started in 2022, right? So all of those things will be incorporated, and all those are milestones that we have to hit before we start the next process. As far as the timeline goes, steam turbine 8 looks to be complete in May of this year. Unit 2 retrofit complete in July of this year, giving us some time for empirical data to get both of those in place. We're looking at beginning the IRP process, or the next round for the IRP, in the first quarter of 2022, with updated IRP results somewhere around the third quarter of 2022. And I believe that concludes our presentation. The slide deck does have some appendices. That appendices includes some of the details for the renewable scenarios. It includes some of the information around NERC and how it works and how they're related. It also includes some of the language from the statutes, the Florida statutes surrounding the 10-year site plan. But we felt like we didn't need to go through those here as part of the presentation, but it is there for your reference in the future.
All right, thanks, Eric. I appreciated your presentation. In fact, I'd have to say that reading the IRP was a lot less pleasurable than hearing your much more nuanced explanation of the IRP. Did I put that well? Did I cover that?
I appreciate that. I do.
Yes. That's a much better nuanced explanation of things that had me riled up a little bit. So I appreciate that quite a bit. Any questions from the floor?
Chair Porter, Member Jacobson had his hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Barry, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought it was a very interesting presentation. A lot of good stuff in there. In the presentation right at the end, in the summary, you were talking about the gains in CO2 reduction from converting to natural gas. First, I think GRU has a lot to be proud of things that we've done, a positive environmental, but conversion to natural gas isn't one of them. Again, we've had this discussion before. Yes, if you look very locally, not at the total life cycle, that's a benefit. So first, I would encourage you not to present a conversion to natural gas as being a very, very strong positive environmental benefit, because it puts us in a bad position of having to say, yeah, you're doing all these good things, but that's really not true. But my question to that point is that influencing the results of the IRP, that assumption that natural gas is a benefit?
When you look at the Chair, when you look at the inputs to the IRP, natural gas emissions are not considered within the constraints of the IRP. Natural gas pricing is. So you can make some estimations on what the emissions would be, but that's not something that the model explicitly takes into account.
All right.
So,
Thanks.
so Eric, Dino, I just want to, for Member Jacobson, I want to cover a couple things here. The main reason for the retrofit of Deerhaven 2 is cost savings. Okay, I mean, the natural gas per dollar per MMBTU is much less than the dollars of MMBTU for coal. The byproduct is we have reduction of 30% emission as a result of it. That's a fact. That doesn't change that we reduce our emissions by 30%. But the main driver for it, and the reason we're doing the retrofit, is to a cost reduction for rate relief for our customers.
I think if you allow me to comment, Dino, I think what Barry is trying to say is stick with the price savings explanation. It doesn't, your emission reduction is only at the power plant. It doesn't take into account fugitive emissions along the whole natural gas transmission and production time frame or production line. But the price savings is irrefutable and the best thing for our local customers. So we should stick with that primary argument.
And I was in favor. I voted in favor of the change because of the price. But totally to Chair Porter's point, if you look at the whole picture, that I would not go there because I don't think that's really correct.
Again, Dino DeLeo, Energy Supply Officer, I will let you know when we kicked off getting the Deerhaven 2 retrofit, one of the main reasons the City Commission asked us to kick that off was based on the CO2 reduction going towards net zero. So we're not going to take a piece of information out that's in the report that's accurate, that was part of genesis of the governing board asking us to look at it and then produce the results and then ultimately be approved by yourself and then the City Commission back in July of 2019.
Yeah, I understand that, Dino. It's just that we're happy that the price savings are what they are. It was a main driver for us. Yeah. So any other questions on the floor?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Member Wheeler.
I would appreciate staff's presentation, very comprehensive. Following up on comments made by Members Foltz and Member Crow tonight, I'd like to see this board get more involved more directly in encouraging a more creative emphasis on achieving the city's stated goal of 100% renewable by 2045. I'd like to see a scenario generated that did not assume a straight line projection of peak load that shows maybe meeting some of our demand needs by conservation, which is not part of this report. By reducing, I mean, that we time and time again, the general manager tells us we've got too much generation now. We got too much generation. We can't do new solar, et cetera, et cetera. Well, why don't we look at when Deerhaven 2 comes off, maybe instead of building back up this same level of generation we have now, maybe plugging conservation in and making that a high goal. There are things we can do instead of wringing our hands and say, oh, this is going to cost too much to go renewable. Oh, it's more than the base load. The base scenario, we can't continue with the base scenario. Our world is burning up, and this base scenario, it's great. That's the cheapest thing. It doesn't account for all other things that are going on around us. It doesn't account for the common cost, the cost of commonalities, the externalities that they're not there. We need to broaden our scope, our perspective, and start thinking about things like conservation and limiting peak load, and rather than just going down the same old path over and over and over. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Wheeler. I think we'll have plenty of time since the next IRP is coming up shortly to get our oars in the water and also to cover a number of areas that personally, it's late in the night and the staff has accomplished a really nice goal here and presented it in much better detail than the written form. And serious in my comments to Eric that his much more nuanced presentation left me feeling a little bit better about things, but I still have, I think I wrote down about 2 pages of questions and comments, of which I will not go through tonight. But I think this is top of the list for our next workshop to actually get all of us with our concerns written down and some plan forward on how to alleviate those concerns and how to work those into the next IRP. appreciating the fact that these things do change. They have already changed in the time frame that the data was used to produce this report. So the conclusions are already different. We just don't know them. So any other, this was informational tonight. Any other comments on the floor?
I've got a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Member Crow.
It's getting late and we've got a lot of things to do. And you're talking about another workshop, so that's great. We can really get down and dirty. But just quickly here, if you could go back to your recap slide on slide 58, the recap. I didn't understand that. We're looking at replacing something like 430 megawatts, but we have here numbers that don't track with that at all. We say solar 750. Are we supposed to be taking 35% of that as the contribution for the...
Chair, yes, there's 35, the model takes 35% of the nameplate.
35% of the 780 is what really adds to it. And what about the others, the biomass, the rice? Do we, run those at 48% or something, or 15%, or?
No, those are considered capacity, or true capacity. So the only number you have to really reduce is the solar number by 35%. Keep in mind, in two of these scenarios at least, there's some that is used just for backup and to supplement, correct? So when solar is not available, or when solar has sharp decreases in output, and it puts us in that regulatory risk, that's when most of the rice and the battery are going to be deployed.
All right, so to make this apples with apples, we need to take the 35% of the 780. Okay, I'd point out that in your attachments, or appendices at the end, you have scenarios 1, 2, and 3, but those don't match at all the scenarios that are actually in the printed IRP. The IRP has 11 different scenarios, but they don't track at all with years 1, 2, and 3 there. So if we have a workshop again, I would like to ask staff if you could sort of see if you could correlate those together, so they're not confusing. They're not independent. Also, if we have a workshop again on this subject, it would seem to me it would be very valuable if you could present some hypothetical alternatives where we have an accelerated solar implementation. In other words, instead of waiting until 2031 when DH2 is retired, what about early retirement for one or more units to have a more aggressive or more accelerated solar implementation? In addition to that, when we do this again, I'd like to see at least one run, if not several runs, which look at 2035. I think you know that the Biden administration is really beating the drum for getting electric utilities to have 100% renewables by 2035. Now that's a very aggressive goal, but it may be one that GRU may be expected to achieve here pretty soon. So what would happen if we were looking at 2035?
Do you want to answer that, Eric? Or, I mean, quite frankly, yeah, go ahead.
Sure. When you look at this, we've talked about the existing technology, and we've talked about what is available to us now. And so we looked at that approach to meet that 2045 goal. What did it look like to do it with the existing technology? Any acceleration of that goal, number one, just increases your cost. And number two, ties you into the existing technology that is there. When you look at the landscape of renewable energy that's available in Gainesville, Florida, you've got two options. You've got solar and you've got biomass. That's it. There is no wind. There is no geothermal. There is no wave that's of any appreciable value. We have no hydro. You have solar and you have biomass. And so accelerating that curve increases your cost, and it ties you to the existing technology that's available. Part of the takeaways from this plan is looking at saying, let's give technology some more time to advance. Maybe there is something in fuel cells. Maybe battery technology makes a huge leap in the next 5 years. And the dollars that we spend on battery gets us a lot further to meeting that need. But if we try to accelerate, we're going to accelerate at today's technology at a higher cost.
Well, and let me add to that, Eric. I mean, that's absolutely true. And if you want to decommission the DH2 earlier, remember what Eric's been saying about the 4-to-1 and the 2-to-1 with solar and having quick start capabilities. You know, if you decommission the Deer Haven 2 facility, you're going to have to, if you want to escalate the solar, you're going to have to build more gas plants. There's just not another technology available to do that. So, you know, we haven't been sitting on our hands with this, and we can come up with different things and say, what if we want to do it today? Well, we can look at this, and it won't go anywhere. I mean, it's not available to us. Look, we're going to be bringing back some, you know, Eric talked about merging with BFA and looking at our model. We have a financial advisor, PFM, that has looked at this, and they've, you know, they're looking at our debt portfolio right now. You know, there's a lot of issues that are confronting us right now. We'll come back and we'll show you some of the financial impacts just of this. If you want to escalate it, boy.
I think we can leave that for another conversation, Ed. We got a lot of issues to work on here, and it was a nice presentation tonight by your gang, and we got a lot to swallow here and digest and come back with some interesting plans ourselves. So I'd like to see if the board members have any other comments.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
I just wanted to add, this was a really interesting presentation, and I would definitely like to talk about a lot of this stuff some more. I don't really have a question. I was just going to say, it seems that my takeaway from what was presented is that really making this work hinges on battery storage, so that you can release the solar at a steady rate instead of having to respond to the ebb and flow of it. So I would be interested in some actual financial information, so some numbers of what battery storage costs now, and if there are any projections into the future. And because, you know, it is a significant expense, and since this is a city commission initiated idea, you know, maybe they might find some place to find some money, and maybe they earmark some GFT money for that for battery purchases. You know. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Member Rockwell. All right. Since this is information only, and we asked for this presentation, I definitely want to thank everybody that presented for giving a much better complete presentation than just reading the 95-page report was for me.
Agreed. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks, gang. And I think the only item left for us, go ahead. Question, somebody?
No, go ahead. I just have a member comment at the end of the meeting here.
Oh, okay. We're not quite there, Teresa. Sorry. Yeah. The only other item was our annual report that and let me clarify this. Member Wheeler, you had some questions early on about this. This is a requirement by the City Commission for all the boards. It wasn't specially directed at us and had nothing per se to do with our energy policy thing. It was just a question by the City Commission to all the boards to provide them an annual report.
I understand.
Yeah,
and have a
sorry
response when
about
we
that,
get to
Wes. Anyway, so I wrote one, and Member Crow was very nice to put together his much better grasp of the English written language than me, and corrected the red lines in that copy you have. The only change that I would bring out to move this on, we're trying to get this ready to go so it can be presented within the time frame to the City Commission. The only change I'd recommend is the very last change, where Member Crow commented when I said that any city commissioner could give us a holler when they wanted to. The City Commission can talk member by member, one at a time, to any UAB member, member by member, one at a time, without violating the sunshine laws. It's just any two members of a single board can't get together. But I could talk to Harvey Ward all day long and to any other members. I would direct staff. I've already talked to Robin Baxley to use her extreme education on English language to just correct that last sentence to reflect that. And other than that, I'd recommend we let it go as is, but open the floor for comments.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Wes.
I really appreciate all the hard work that the members put into this from the last meeting. My comments are more directed at the process, not a criticism of anybody or anything. It's just, I don't feel comfortable with filing a report, not this one specifically, but just any report after a single meeting. I know that COVID kind of delayed all this, and I realize all the boards have the same sort of requirement. It's just, based on one discussion, I don't think that this really reflects what we're doing. And that was why I made the comment about the strategic policy plan, because if we had a report to the city commission, to me, that policy plan that we've been working on for several years would be our statement, would be our report.
Yeah.
That's just my feelings on the matter. The other feeling I have, and for consistency's sake, I'll bring it up. I've said it before, I don't think this board has a place, a role in discussing the GFT. The general funds transfer is a political matter. It's one for the city commission to decide, and it's for negotiations between staff, between the general manager and the city manager to work out. So I personally wouldn't feel comfortable making a statement that one of our priorities is to reforms to the GFT. I think that's not on our bailiwick, but I'll defer to the other members. Again, not a criticism of the statement you put together. I think it's great. I'm going to vote no simply because I don't think we should be involved in the GFT. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Member Wheeler, and thank you for that clarification. Any other comments from the floor?
I just had one. I was looking at where we talked about, the most significant projects for the year and whatnot, and I noticed that there was no mention of the Deer Haven 2 conversion, and I didn't know if that was intentional or just an oversight, but it seems significant to me.
Yeah, it was an oversight. I just picked the top three in my mind, and you're right, the Deer Haven 2 conversion is significant, but I thought I wanted to minimize the list. Sorry about the oversight. Having been a creature of administratium land at the University of Florida, annual reports are something to short and sweet and make sure you catch the eye of the big items. And that's why, even though I fundamentally agree with Member Wheeler about the GFT and our place in that, it is a huge actor in our relationship with our utility. And so regardless of who has the conversation, I believe that affects how we do our business as a board, a UAB board. And so that's why I put it in there. So again, I'd be happy to let other parties take the lead on that, such as a mediation board, and go along with their suggestions. But still, it is a huge part of us going forward with a lot of these ideas, even the existence of the utility. So I kind of, I'll take my own ability to straddle the fence on that one and both agree with Member Wheeler and vote for the annual report as written. So that's how I'm going to sit there on that one. Any other comments on that? Do I hear a motion for, go ahead. Somebody had to comment?
No, I just want to say, well done, sir. Well done.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Any other comments on the floor? Do I hear a motion to send that annual report on with the correction that staff is going to make for that last sentence on the sunshine law implications?
So moved.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, a second. Any other conversation on that from anybody out there in the field? If we're going to vote on that, that's got to be input from the field. Not hearing anybody out there. He's probably, again, I got him so long, he's fumbling with the mute button again.
No. I was here. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were calling me.
Yeah,
Nope. There is nobody in the public domain. The floor is yours.
All right. So if we could get staff to do a roll call vote on that, please.
Excuse me. Member Wheeler.
Nay.
Member Jacobson.
Unmute, Barry.
Aye.
Okay. Member Miles is absent. Member Rockwell.
Aye.
Member Crow.
Aye.
Member Fultz.
Aye.
And Chair Porter.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes 5-1 with Member Wheeler in dissent.
All right. And I think that's our last item of business. I think we have a member comment from Teresa. I'll let Teresa go
Hi,
first.
yes. Hey, I just wanted to tell the GRU family and everybody else, express some sorrow for the loss of one of the great people they had there, Amy Karpus. She did a lot for water conservation, for just so much. And she's going to be greatly missed. And I just wanted to put it out there. I worked with her for a number of years while I was at GRU, and it's been quite shocking. So I just want to put it out there. She was one of the really good guys there at GRU.
Wait a minute, Teresa. What do you mean by loss?
She passed away.
Holy
Amy passed away.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Amy was
Over
a
the
young-
holiday break. I'm sorry, I thought you knew.
Oh God, no. Oh geez. Yeah, wow.
So I just wanted to say that, you know, she really did a lot in the conservation programs, in the community, and outreach, and, you know, with a lot of the monthly and annual reports and training auditors, and just, she did a lot over the years. I don't think people realize how much she did. And she's good. That's a big hole.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to put it out there and acknowledge that, you know, I'm going to miss being able to pick up the phone and say, hey, Amy, what's up with the water leaks? Or, you know, information on something. So, yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up, Teresa. You know, it's a young life taken from us too quickly, and she was a sweetheart in so many different ways, and yeah, it's kind of stunning, and we are going to miss her. So thank you for speaking her name and telling everyone that, you know, she's gone from us.
Wow. Well, anybody else have any other comments? Member comments?
Thank you to the staff. There was a lot of work went into tonight's meeting, and I know they spent long hours preparing and staying up late to talk to us. So I wanted to thank them all, even if I may not agree at all times. I always appreciate everything that's brought to us, all the work that's into it.
All right. Thank you, Member Wheeler. Any other member comments? All right. We'll let's see. Robin usually signs off by telling us what our next meeting is.
Yes. Do we want to still have the workshop, your regular workshop on the 26th?
I think so. And items on there should be our energy policy and the IRP.
Okay. All right. Yeah, at least in the dark, I don't move often enough. So yes, and the next meeting after the 26th will be, if I can see in the dark here, February 11th will be your next regular meeting.
Gotcha. Okay. Member Wheeler, go ahead.
While we're talking about future workshop discussions, I agree, the policy plan and the IRP would be great. I'd also like to have a discussion about electric vehicles and electric mass transit on a workshop. One of the things talked about in the IRP is increasing demand, increasing revenues, and EVs and mass transit are one way of having a win-win. So I'd like to have us discuss it at a workshop in the near future.
Sure, absolutely. Top of my list too. Thanks for reminding me of that, Wes, very much.
But just to clarify, though, we don't want to try to put that on this workshop.
No, not this one. Two items, especially the size of the two we're talking about, are enough.
I agree. I just didn't want it to fall off the table as being forgotten about.
Thanks, Wes.
Do you want to try to bring somebody there from general government in that regard? Because, mass transit and.
But for one down the road, let's think about that.
I would like to have somebody from RTS there. I mean, and see what they're doing and represent, but that's just me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Because they'd be better equipped to really give you answers. They really would.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Ed, for bringing that up. Okay.
If we have the IRP on the agenda the next workshop, I think it would be very helpful if we had some runs that show the environmental impacts of various scenarios.
Member Crow, I don't think that the organization will have enough time between now and then to make separate scenarios and separate data runs on that. And frankly, I just between Wes's comments and my own page filling at my end, we'll have plenty, I'm sure, with your questions too. And I can't imagine that Barry doesn't have more than a couple also that we'll have plenty to chew on at our next meeting. Yeah. All right, with that.
Hi, if I can just hop in for one moment. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Jamie.
So today we presented, today we presented the results of the IRP. What is it that you would like to see at the workshop related to the IRP?
Our end of it, it's a workshop for us. And I know just from my own notes and Member Wheeler's questions and a couple other questions that we have to, there's a lot of things out there that probably need to be talked about for the next iteration because this is already set, this is already done. But we have another IRP coming up in 2022, was it? 2023 or whatever. But I taken to heart Wes's comments that we need to be in on the planning on that. And that is to express some of the areas of concern that need to go into the next one that aren't in this one. There's a lot of things that were not scenarioed out in this one that probably need to be talked about. And I personally like to not be redundant and go over it 9 different times. And so probably between me and Wes and Barry, we probably have 50% overlap on just our own notes. So there's no sense doing that at the end of this meeting. I think we need to have a workshop to kind of compare our notes and get our act together and come back to you on things that we need to look at. Long answer for that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. All right. So I think that's it, unless we have any other member comments, but I think that's it for the evening. Thanks, and for everybody, and again, our thoughts go out to the family of Amy Karpus.
Don't forget to pass our thanks on to the folks that worked on Christmas.
That note, he'll extend it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Ed, are you still there?